Chapter 1925. The Black Shadow said suspiciously. Looking at you, you seem to know Wuxian very well? I don't even know what he looks like. How could I know him? Qin Feiyang shook his head. The Black Shadow said. So it's like that. I thought you had something to do with him. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. In terms of relationship, there was a little bit. Otherwise, why would this Wuxian give him the ancient castle, Changshui, and the 6-word secret art? He even reminded him to comprehend the law of life and death? But he couldn't figure out what kind of relationship there was. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and asked, besides the law of life and death and the law of fire, what other law of life and death are there? Many. For example, wind, fire, thunder, lightning, metal, wood, water, earth, light, darkness, time, space-time. They all belong to their own law of life. I have a few old friends who have mastered the law of time and space-time respectively. The Black Shadow said. Time, space-time. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, time reversal and space-time travel, do they belong to the law of time and space-time law? That's right. It's a coincidence. I have 2 old friends, they respectively mastered the time reversal and space-time travel. The Black Shadow said. It can't be? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Could it be that the old friends that the Black Shadow mentioned were the Bloodblade and Snowflake? It shouldn't be. How could there be such a coincidence? The Black Shadow said. Their bodies are both divine weapons. One is a blood-red dagger, the other is a snowflake. I wonder how they are doing now. What? Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded, and then waved his hand. The shadow of the snowflake and the dagger appeared. Seeing this, the Black Shadow was slightly stunned, and said in surprise, how do you know what they look like? Have you seen them before? Haha. Qin Feiyang raised his head and laughed. What are you laughing at? The Black Shadow was suspicious. It's really a coincidence. Not only have I seen them, but I've also fought with them. And my inner demons also cut their bodies. Qin Feiyang sneered. What? Impossible. I know their strength the best. With your current strength, let alone shattering their bodies, you can't even get close to them. The black figure said decisively. Don't overestimate yourself. Qin Feiyang coldly laughed. After which he continued, since the 2 of you are friends, there's even more reason for me not to release you. Why? The black figure hurriedly said. I know exactly what kind of trash they are. As for you, you're jackals of the same lair as them. That means you're not much either. Qin Feiyang snorted. It's a misunderstanding. Although we're friends, we've always been using each other. Speaking of true feelings, I don't have any at all. The Black Shadow hurriedly explained. Don't waste your breath. I won't fall for your tricks. After saying that, Qin Feiyang turned around and prepared to leave. Really? You have to believe me. If you let me out, I'm even willing to help you deal with them. The Black Shadow hurriedly stood in front of Qin Feiyang and roared. Deal with them. Qin Feiyang muttered and looked at the Black Shadow. After a while he said, I'll think about it. Thank you. The Black Shadow shed tears of gratitude. As long as he thought about it, there was still a chance. Whoosh. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and instantly disappeared without a trace. I didn't expect you to get out of here before me. You must wait for me, the black figure murmured, and also silently dispersed in the void. Returning to the sky above the herb field, Qin Feiyang looked at the screen. The blood python was still guarding outside, its body full of hostility. I'll go to the castle to cultivate first. Qin Feiyang looked at the female fire lotus and said, go ahead. Anyway, I can't cultivate now. I'll help you guard here. When the blood python leaves, I'll call you. Fire Lotus said. Thank you. Qin Feiyang smiled and entered the castle. Time passed in a flash. 5 days passed. However, 5 years had passed in the castle. White-Eyed Wolf, Lei Bao, Qin Rishuang, Willow Tree, and Yu Huang had all reached the War God realm one after another. Blood Qilin, Zhao Tailai, Tantai Li, Chui Li Golden Divine Leopard, and Tang Hai's cultivation had also improved. Dan Wangkai had also reached the peak of the 9-star Combat Emperor realm with the help of a large number of elixirs. Qin Feiyang, come out quickly. On the evening of the 5th day, the female Fire Lotus's voice was heard in the castle. Qin Feiyang immediately opened his eyes and appeared in the black tortoise boundary with Dan Wangkai. The blood python has just left, but the divine power boundary is still there. Fire Lotus said immediately. Qin Feiyang looked at the screen and then looked at Dan Wangkai and said, "You should know the ultimacy of becoming a true god, right?" "Of course." Dan Wangkai nodded and smiled. Qin Feiyang said, "Then you go. When you break through to become a true god, come find me in the herb field." "Okay." Dan Wangkai responded and turned into a stream of light, disappearing into the vast world like lightning. Qin Feiyang also retracted his gaze and looked at the screen again. There was indeed no trace of the blood python in the boundary. Fire Lotus asked, "Are you confident that you can break the boundary?" "I can even injure its divine body, let alone a mere barrier." Qin Feiyang smiled confidently. But then, he frowned again and did not go out for a long time. "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus looked at him in confusion. Qin Feiyang said, "I was thinking, since the blood python has left, why didn't it remove the boundary?" "Is there a problem?" Fire Lotus asked. "Of course there is a problem. Think about it. If it really thinks that we have escaped, why would it leave this behind?" "The only explanation is that it is still suspicious that we are trapped here. Maybe it is pretending to leave to lure us out," Qin Feiyang said. Huo Yin frowned when she heard that. Qin Feiyang thought for a while and smiled. "I think we should wait a little longer." "Do as you wish," Fire Lotus said. Time passed quietly. The night passed, and the sun slowly rose from the horizon. At this moment, the blood python rushed out from the mountains below and entered the screen. Huo Yin was stunned for a moment. Then, she glanced at Qin Feiyang. She didn't expect him to guess correctly. If they went out yesterday, it would be equivalent to walking into a trap. This person's mind is not simple. Fire Lotus muttered and looked at the blood python in the screen. When the blood python entered the barrier, its divine sense appeared and scanned the void with a gloomy gaze. "Human brat, no matter where you hide, this emperor will not let you go." All of a sudden, it let out a roar, filled with anger, and flew into the depths of the mountain. The barrier also dissipated. "We can go now." Qin Feiyang smiled at Fire Lotus, then controlled the Black Tortoise realm and flew away like lightning. Half a day later, the Black Tortoise realm finally crossed the mountain range and appeared above a plain. The plain was huge, full of weeds and shrubs, and there were many large and small ponds. And in those pools, one could basically sense terrifying ferocious might. Obviously, there were berserk beasts hiding in the ponds. Whoosh! 2 figures, one male and one female, suddenly appeared beside one of the ponds. It was Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. Fire Lotus looked around and asked, "Next, are you going directly to the Gua family or?" "No. Let's go somewhere else first and see if we can get soul stones," Qin Feiyang said. "Soul stones?" Fire Lotus was stunned and frowned. "A few days ago, didn't you just swindle 10,000 soul stones?" "It's all used up," Qin Feiyang said. "So fast?" Fire Lotus was stunned. "It's not like you don't know that the time inside the castle is different from outside. Although only 5 or 6 days have passed outside, 5 or 6 years have passed inside the castle. Those 10,000 soul stones have already been refined by us." Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Fire Lotus was stunned and shook her head helplessly. "At this rate, no matter how many soul stones there are, it won't be enough for you." "Yeah. If only we can get a few soul veins," Qin Feiyang said. "Not enough soul veins. The castle's time rules are too abnormal. Even the production of level 9 soul veins can't keep up. Unless there are hundreds or thousands of level 9 soul veins. Or you can put them in the castle, but your castle is too small. It probably can't even fit the lowest level 1 soul veins." Fire Lotus said. "Headache." Qin Feiyang rubbed his head. "Let's go out first." "After we go out, don't ask me anything because I've only been to the Gua family. I'm not familiar with the other places," Fire Lotus said. "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. Just as the two were about to leave, a fierce crocodile suddenly jumped out of the pool. Its body was more than 10 meters long. Its cultivation had reached the level of a new war god. However, Fire Lotus just casually waved her hand, and a wave of divine power surged. The fierce crocodile died on the spot and fell into the pool with a loud bang. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. Although Fire Lotus's cultivation was higher than the fierce crocodile's skin was thick and its defense was terrifying. It was even comparable to a new-level wargid's defense. However, Huolian was able to kill it effortlessly just now, and he found that there wasn't a single wound on the fierce crocodile's body, nor was there a drop of blood. In other words, Fire Lotus's divine power didn't hurt the fierce crocodile's body. If it didn't hurt the body, how did the fierce crocodile die? Wait. Suddenly, his eyes focused as he looked at the divine power that was converging into Fire Lotus's body. He found that in Fire Lotus's divine power, there was an aura of death. This aura of death was like the aura of a death god, emotionless, cold, and directly attacking the soul. Fire Lotus seemed to see Qin Feiyang's doubts and explained, "Because I'm a dead spirit, this isn't divine power, but the power of the dead spirit. This power of the dead spirit is a bit special. It can ignore defense, enter the mind, and directly wipe out the soul." Ignore defense, directly wipe out the soul. Qin Feiyang was shocked. No wonder he didn't see any injuries on the fierce crocodile's body. It turned out that the soul was wiped out. Such a terrifying power of the dead spirit, it seems like he had to be more careful in the future. Because this woman's identity was still a mystery. Whether she would be an enemy or a friend in the future, no one knew. At the same time, he couldn't help but think, since this power of the dead spirit could ignore defense, then could the armor formed by the battle formula block it? Chapter 1926. With doubts in his heart, Qin Feiyang walked towards the end of the plain with Fire Lotus. At the end of the plain there was a river. It was about 100 meters wide. The river flowed rapidly. On the other side of the river, there was a dense forest with vines and old trees. Soon, Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus arrived in front of the river. There were many ferocious beasts lurking in the water, but they were not as strong as those they encountered in the mountains. Not to mention terrifying existences like the blood python. The two of them rose into the air, and were about to fly across the river. However, Qin Feiyang was suddenly stunned. "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus stopped and turned to look at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said to Fire Lotus, "I suddenly thought of something that might help you." "What is it?" Fire Python was suspicious. "Wait a moment." Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously and entered the ancient castle in a flash. He walked straight to the altar, opened the iron box and opened the alchemy scripture. He vaguely remembered. When he was reading the alchemy scripture, he seemed to have seen a pill called the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill. However, he was attracted by the Heavenly Dust Divine Pill, and did not pay attention to it. After opening the alchemy scripture, Qin Feiyang immediately looked for the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill. Indeed, in the alchemy scripture, there was the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill. This pill could allow the undead to go through the baptism of the heavenly tribulation, and reconstruct their human body. After reconstructing their human body, not only could they shed their undead body, they could also absorb the essence of heaven and earth to cultivate. Simply put, after taking the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill, and successfully transcending the tribulation, the undead could become a real human. As for the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill, it required a total of 4 herbs. They were Undead Flower, Death Fruit, Yin Yang Wood, and Extreme Yang Thunder Fire. I've never heard of these herbs before. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. He closed the alchemy scripture and pondered for a moment before leaving the ancient castle, and appearing beside Fire Lotus. "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus was suspicious. Her expression was very gentle, and her personality was very kind. She looked like a little sister next door, and there was no threat at all. Qin Feiyang smiled. As he flew to the other side of the river, he asked, "Have you ever heard of a pill called the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill?" Fire Lotus was beside Qin Feiyang. She pondered for a moment and shook her head. "I don't remember. What's the use of this Undead Barrier Breaking Pill? It's useless to us living people. But to an undead like you, it means a lot." Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation with the Undead Barrier Breaking Pill. "Really?" Fire Lotus was very excited. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, and I'm thinking that if you shed your undead body, you might be able to recover your memories. Fire Lotus grabbed Qin Feiyang and begged, Qin Dage, you have to help me. The days without my memories are too painful, it's simply torture. Qin Dage. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. He smiled bitterly. Although I don't know your past, I can imagine that you must have lived for thousands of years, or even tens of thousands of years. Is it appropriate to call me Big Brother? Fire Lotus was stunned. She covered her mouth and laughed. I didn't expect you to be such an old-fashioned person. It's just a title. What's the matter? I'm old-fashioned? Qin Feiyang was speechless. He shook his head and said, well, it's up to you. But your last sentence made me a little sad. The days without memories are very painful. It's torture. You thought of Lin Yi? Fire Lotus asked. Yeah. She should be the same as you. I really hope that she can quickly recover her memories and stop suffering. Qin Feiyang sighed. You are really a good man. Fire Lotus smiled. A good man? Qin Feiyang was taken aback. He smiled helplessly. Why do I feel that it's a bit ironic? This sentence is from the bottom of my heart. Although I don't know much about you, with your talent and strength, I believe that there must be many women who like you. But in your heart, there is only one woman, the mermaid princess, from beginning to end. If you are not a good man, then who is? Fire Lotus said. Don't praise me like that. I will fly to the sky. Qin Feiyang touched his nose, a little embarrassed. Fire Lotus joked. Then fly, because no matter how high you fly, I can drag you down. You are also quite interesting. I really hope that when you recover your memories, we will not become enemies. Qin Feiyang smiled. That's for sure. We will always be friends. Fire Lotus said. So sure? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Fire Lotus was speechless. You are a person who has just entered the ancient world. What grudges can I have with you? That's true. But there is an old saying that the world is unpredictable. I still hope that you and I can remember what we said today. Qin Feiyang smiled. I will remember. Fire Lotus nodded. Passing through the river, the two of them entered the sky above the forest and looked ahead. The forest covered an area of about tens of thousands of miles. With Qin Feiyang's current low-level war god cultivation, he could clearly see the scenery tens of thousands of miles away. At the end of the forest, which was the edge of the forest, there were villages of various sizes. And in the forest, there were many people hunting. The battlefield of humans and beasts could be seen everywhere. And the beasts in this forest were not very strong. The most powerful one was only a war god. Of course, the humans hunting in the forest were not strong either. Seniors, did you come from the mountain range on the other side of the river? Suddenly, a timid voice sounded from the forest below. There's someone. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus glanced at each other and looked down. They saw three young people standing below and looking at them curiously. At the same time, there was also a trace of vigilance in their eyes. The three of them looked to be in their 20s. They were all covered in blood, and their hair was very messy. Obviously, they were also hunting in the forest. You actually didn't notice them? Qin Feiyang muttered. With his cultivation, he could see through the strength of the three at a glance. They were only one-star war gods. A mere one-star war god could actually hide from his perception? Even Fire Lotus did not notice them? Swish. The two of them took a step forward and landed in front of the three. The three of them immediately retreated. The vigilance on their faces was even stronger. Don't be nervous. Qin Feiyang revealed a kind smile. The three of them glanced at each other, and still did not let down their guard. Qin Feiyang said, let me ask you, why didn't I sense you approaching? It should be because of this. One of the young men took out a jade pendant from the clothes on his chest. So it's like this. Qin Feiyang mumbled. He took a closer look at the jade pendant, and could tell that it was made by the soul sealing stone. However, how could three mere war gods have the soul sealing stone? Qin Feiyang asked secretly, Fire Lotus, is the soul sealing stone very common in this ancient realm? I'm not sure either. But last time, when I sneaked into the Gua family, I found that many people were wearing the soul sealing stone. Fire Lotus transmitted her voice. That's right. The soul sealing stone is not considered a rare thing in the ancient realm. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Thinking back to when he was in the Great Qin and Forgotten Continent, finding a soul sealing stone was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But here it was like carrots and cabbages everywhere. The young man who took out the jade pendant asked suspiciously again, "Seniors, did you come from the other side of the river? Is this very important?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Yes. The young man nodded. The other two young men also waited for Qin Feiyang's answer, with a look of anticipation. Yes. We came from the land of the undead. Qin Feiyang said. So you guys crossed that mountain range? The three of them asked in surprise. That's right. Qin Feiyang nodded. Amazing. It said that there are monarch god-level beasts in that mountain range. The three of them were extremely shocked. You guys know about it too? Qin Feiyang asked. Of course. We live in a village outside the forest. Although we have never been to that mountain range, we have heard about it from the elders in the village. They said that the mountain range is a forbidden area. And this river here is the dividing line. You must not cross it. Two lords, to be able to cross the land of the undead, you must be very strong. Can you accept us as your disciples and teach us how to cultivate? The three young men looked at Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus with a pleading look. Disciples? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other. Two lords, please accept us. We just want to become stronger. The three of them looked at each other, and even knelt on the ground and begged. What's going on? Qin Feiyang frowned. They were just strangers who met by chance. They didn't even know what kind of person he and Fire Lotus were, and they wanted to be apprenticed? Fire Lotus walked forward and smiled. Get up first. The three of them got up and looked at Fire Lotus with a pitiful look. Fire Lotus's eyes were very gentle. Tell me first. Why do you want to become stronger? We want to protect our family in the village. Yes. We don't want to be oppressed by them anymore. The three of them clasped their hands and said, Oppress? Who is oppressing you? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The Guo family. One of the young men said, his eyes full of hatred. The Guo family? Qin Feiyang was stunned and frowned. The Guo family you're talking about, is the patriarch called Guo Zixiong? Yes. The three of them nodded. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other. Fire Lotus said telepathically, It seems that the Guo family is not a kind person. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and looked at the three young men calmly. How does the Guo family oppress you? The Guo family is very domineering. Hundreds of villages of various sizes within a few 100,000 miles are all controlled by them. Usually not only do they beat, scold and bully us, but they also ask us to hand over 50 soul stones to them every year. You two lords must know how precious soul stones are. On the market, they are basically priceless. Villages like ours can only barely gather 50 pieces after working hard for a whole year. Sometimes, when we're unlucky and can't find anything valuable, we can't even gather that many. The three young men were talking at the same time, and all of them had an angry look on their faces. Literature Museum. Chapter 1927. There's such a thing? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. If the three of them weren't lying, then the Guo family was indeed too much. Sir, we can guarantee with our lives that every word is true. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was a little doubtful, the three young men patted their chests and swore. Then what if your villages can't gather 50 soul stones? Qin Feiyang asked. Pay with your life. Kill one person for every soul stone missing. Over the years, more than 20 people in our village have been mercilessly killed by them. The eyes of the three were filled with resentment. Pay with your life. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang was furious. How could they do such an inhumane thing? How pitiful. Fire Lotus sighed. Sir, please take us in. We really don't want to be bullied by the Guo family anymore. The three young men begged bitterly. You're so anxious. Have you never thought that we're bad people? Or are we from the Guo family? Qin Feiyang said. The Guo family. The three of them looked at the two of them with fear in their eyes. Don't be so nervous. I do have some connections with the Guo family, but I'm not from the Guo family. Qin Feiyang smiled. You have connections with the Guo family? The three of them trembled and immediately turned around to flee. Because in their view, having connections with the Guo family meant that they were related. What three reckless brats! At least before they become apprentices, they should find out the other party's identity. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Although they are reckless, it also shows how desperate they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so desperate. And when they heard that you have connections with the Guo family, they immediately ran away. It shows how scared they are of the Grand Preceptor. Fire Lotus said. It doesn't make sense. Our ancestor is such a kind person. How could he be friends with the Guo family? Not to mention leaving behind a marriage contract? Qin Feiyang frowned. I think there's something fishy about this. We need to investigate. Fire Lotus said. It's not just an investigation, it's a thorough investigation. A cold light flashed in Qin Feiyang's eyes. If the Guo family was really such a person, then the possibility of the marriage contract being forged could not be ruled out. If the marriage contract was forged, then don't blame him for being impolite. But, regardless of whether the marriage contract was real or fake, Guo Zixiong definitely knew the ancestor. Let's go. Let's catch up to them and find out more information. Qin Feiyang said. Fire Lotus nodded. The two of them were both low-level war gods. His speed was much faster than the three youths. In just a few breaths' time, he had caught up with them. Sir, we were wrong. Please don't kill us. Their faces turned pale as they knelt on the ground and begged in despair. Get up. We are all men. How can we kneel to anyone? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and shouted. The three of them trembled and hurriedly crawled to their feet. They stood together, cowering in fear. Qin Feiyang asked, Do you know about the Gao family? Yes. They rule over another area with a few hundred villages. And just like the Guo family, they ask the villages to hand over 50 soul stones every year. The three of them hurriedly said. Qin Feiyang said, I'll say it again. Although I have a relationship with the Guo family, I'm not a member of the Guo family. I won't hurt you. But the three of them did not believe him. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and asked, Then do you know about the war between the Guo family and the Gao family? We've heard about it. The three of them said. I want to know the details. Qin Feiyang said. We don't know the details either. We only heard people talking about it occasionally. The three of them were extremely anxious. Qin Feiyang said. Then tell me what you know. Yes. The Gao family and the Guo family have always been enemies. And whether it's the Guo family or the Gao family, they both want to invade each other's territory and expand their power. But because their overall strength is about the same, although there has been friction over the years, they haven't really shed all pretense of cordiality. And basically, it's just the friction between the younger generation. The older generation has never interfered. But half a year ago, it said that the Guo family's patriarch, Guo Zixiong, suddenly led a group of gods of war and attacked the Gao family. The Gao family was caught off guard and suffered a great loss. They even lost a god of war. Naturally, the Gao family couldn't let this matter go. Since then, the friction between the Guo family and the Gao family has been escalating. After the constant fighting in the past half a year, both sides have lost a lot of clansmen. This is what we know. If you want to know more, you can ask the Gao family and the Guo family. After saying that, the three of them looked at Qin Feiyang anxiously. Qin Feiyang asked, Then why did they attack the land of the undead? The land of the undead? We really don't know about this. The three of them said. Qin Feiyang said, Give me the coordinates of the Gao family and give me a few altars. We have the coordinates. But we don't have the altars. Because a teleportation altar costs 1,000 god crystals. We can't afford it. The three of them said bitterly. Is 1,000 god crystals a lot? Qin Feiyang was doubtful. The three of them didn't know how to answer. Qin Feiyang looked at the three of them and waved his hand. All right. Just give me the coordinates. The Gao family's land is in the southwest. After giving the coordinates to Qin Feiyang, the three of them ran into the forest and disappeared. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and asked again, Is 1,000 god crystals really a lot? I don't know. Fire Lotus shook her head. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled bitterly. He had just come to the ancient world, so he didn't know what 1,000 god crystals was. Looks like I have to inquire about the situation of the ancient world in detail. Qin Feiyang exhaled and brought Fire Lotus with him. They kept teleporting and soon left the forest. One by one, the villages came into sight. The big villages had thousands of families. The smallest village had more than 1,000 families. As for cultivation, the strongest was only a 5 or 6-star war emperor. However, compared to the Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent, the strength of these villages was not simple, because in the Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent, other than the Lu family, there was no other village that could compare to the villages here. Even the 9 provinces of the Great Qin and the 9 regions of the Forgotten Continent combined could not compare to a village here. I'm really looking forward to it. Qin Feiyang did not stop and directly teleported to the southwest. About an hour passed. Suddenly, he stopped above a village. This village had more than 10,000 families. Moreover, he sensed the aura of a false god in the village. Obviously, this village was overseen by a false god. Where did you come from? Following a hoarse shout, a white-haired old man flew into the sky. Qin Feiyang sized up the white-haired old man. This old man was the false god that he had sensed. At the same time, the white-haired old man was also sizing up Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. Suddenly, his pupils suddenly shrank, and he hurriedly bowed and said, "Greetings, lords." He was actually unable to see through the cultivation of these two people. That meant that they were definitely war gods. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Old man, there's no need to be so polite." The white-haired old man did not dare to be negligent at all, and said respectfully, "May I ask, what orders do you have for coming here?" Qin Feiyang said, "I'm just passing by." "So you're just passing by?" The white-haired old man heaved a sigh of relief. Qin Feiyang said, "Old man, I want to ask, is your village ruled by the Guo family or the Gao family?" "We belong to the Guo family," the white-haired old man said. Qin Feiyang asked, "What's the Guo family's character like?" "The Guo family's character?" The white-haired old man was stunned, and immediately became vigilant, asking carefully, "May I ask if you're from the Guo family?" Qin Feiyang turned his head to look at Huolian and said with a smile, "See, people with a bit of experience are indeed different." Fire Lotus said, "More cautious than those 3 brats." Qin Feiyang looked at the white-haired old man and laughed. "Old man, don't worry, I have nothing to do with the Guo family." The white-haired old man did not believe him immediately. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Think about it, if I'm from the Guo family, then I'll definitely know that this village is ruled by the Guo family. Then, I wouldn't have asked you before." The white-haired old man thought about it and nodded. "You're right, my lord. As for the Guo family's character, there's no need for an old man like me to say. In this area, you can ask anyone and you'll know." The old man did not say it directly. Obviously, he did not want to get into trouble. Qin Feiyang, of course, saw through the white-haired old man's thoughts. He laughed. "All right then, I won't make things difficult for you, but can you lend me a teleportation altar?" "You want to borrow a teleportation altar?" The white-haired old man was a little surprised. The 2 war gods did not have a teleportation altar? Qin Feiyang said, "We used to have one, but it's been used up recently." "I see." The white-haired old man nodded in realization, took out an altar from his cosmos bag, and said, "I only have one altar. I'll give it to you, my lord." "Thank you." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and thanked him, then grabbed the altar and was about to open it. Whoosh! But at this moment, 2 men in black suddenly descended above the village. The 2 men were both 2 meters tall, with bulging muscles on their bodies, looking extremely strong, and there was a fierce aura between their eyebrows. And their cultivation was at the false god realm. Looking at the 2 men, the white-haired old man's expression changed. He quickly flew over and bowed. "Greetings, Lord Guocheng, Lord Guoshan." "Guocheng, Guoshan? Are they from the Guo family?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "Yes." Guocheng and Huolian raised their noses and nodded in an overbearing manner. When they raised their heads to look at Qin Feiyang and Huolian, their pupils immediately shrank. Guocheng asked, "Qiyuan, who are they?" The white-haired old man's expression changed slightly, and he said with a flattering smile, "They're just asking for directions." As he spoke, he gave Qin Feiyang and Guoshan a look, indicating that they should leave quickly. But Qin Feiyang did not move. Instead, he put away the teleportation altar, crossed his arms in front of his chest, and watched curiously like a bystander. Fire Lotus was even more indifferent. Chapter 1928. Passers-by. Guocheng and Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus suspiciously for a while before retracting their gaze. Guocheng looked at the white-haired old man and said, "Qi Yuan, you know why we're here, right?" I know. I've already prepared it." Qi Yuan smiled flatteringly, took out a qiankuan bag from his bosom, and respectfully handed it to Guocheng. Guocheng grabbed the qiankuan bag, lowered his head to check, and nodded with a smile. "Not bad, exactly 50 soul stones." The white-haired old man smiled flatteringly. "In front of the two lords, how would I dare to lie?" "Soul stones," Qin Feiyang murmured, and sent a sound transmission. "It seems that they are really from the Guo family." "Since they are from the Guo family, why don't they know you?" Fire Lotus was puzzled. "I guess not many people know about the marriage contract." Qin Feiyang thought. These two were only false gods, at most two errand boys, so they shouldn't be qualified to know about these things. However, the Guo family's cultivation was indeed too much. A rare treasure like the soul stone could be said to be priceless. For a village to gather 50 soul stones in a year, it would probably take the entire clan's strength. This was simply exploitation. At the same time, Guocheng threw the qiankuan bag to Guoshan, looked at the white-haired old man with contempt, and said, "I don't think you have the guts, but from next year onwards, the soul stones will be doubled." "Doubled?" The white-haired old man was stunned, and asked suspiciously, "Lord, what does this mean?" "It means that from next year onwards, villages with false gods like yours will no longer have to hand in 50 soul stones, but 100, Guocheng said. 100? The white-haired old man was startled, and his face suddenly turned pale. "These bastards who eat people without spitting out the bones." Qin Feiyang also frowned. The Guo family was getting more and more outrageous. "Lord, why is this? 50 soul stones a year is already far beyond our burden, let alone 100. Isn't this asking for our lives?" The white-haired old man asked anxiously. "This is the patriarch's order," Guocheng said calmly. The white-haired old man clenched his fists and roared, "I'm going to argue with Guo Zixiong. 100 soul stones a year. Is he going to give us a way out?" "What? I have to hand over 100 soul stones in the future? The Guo clan is going too far." At this moment, the villagers below ran out of their houses one after another and gathered together. They all looked at Guocheng and Guoshan with anger and resentment. Guocheng raised his eyebrows and glanced at the villagers. He looked at the white-haired old man and shouted, "Do you want to rebel?" He had heard of it. A trace of panic appeared on the white-haired old man's face. But then, he straightened his back and roared, "The government forces the people to rebel. If the Guo family really forces us like this, we might rebel." Haha, Guocheng and Guoshan couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Qi Yuan, there's something you don't know yet, right? The Gao clan's territory has already been taken over by my Guo clan. My Guo clan's power now is even greater than before. You dare to rebel?" Guoshan laughed. "What? They've already invaded the Gao clan's territory?" Qi Yuan was surprised. "That's right. Just yesterday evening, the clan leader led more than 20 war gods and killed their way into the Gao clan. Except for Gao Guofang and Gao Xiaowei, everyone in the Gao clan was wiped out by us. Now say it again. Are you rebelling?" Guocheng sneered at the white-haired old man. Hearing this, the white-haired old man's old face turned pale. "Say it. Aren't you very brave? Didn't you even dare to call our clan leader by his name? What? Now that you've heard the news of the Gao clan's destruction, you don't dare to say anything? Old thing, I'm giving you face but you don't want it." Guocheng took a step forward and immediately slapped the white-haired old man's face. A blood-red palm print appeared. Streaks of bright red blood flowed out from the corners of the white-haired old man's mouth. However, the white-haired old man turned a deaf ear to this. His whole person seemed to have become numb. He stood there in a daze, his eyes dim and his face indifferent. The Gua clan's strength skyrocketed after annexing the Gao clan. In the future, their villages would undoubtedly have no way to survive. Suddenly, the white-haired old man looked up at Gua Cheng and said, "Just now, you said that the village with a false god will only have to hand in 100 soul stones." "Yes." Gua Cheng nodded. The white-haired old man said, "Then will the villages without a false god still have to hand in 50 soul stones like before?" "Yes." Gua Cheng nodded again. "Good." The white-haired old man gritted his teeth and looked at the villagers below. He roared with tears in his eyes. From this moment on, this old man is no longer a person of this village. What? The villagers below suddenly became restless. Gua Cheng was also stunned. Then he said angrily, "Old thing, are you playing tricks? This is my home. The people here are also my family. If I wasn't forced to a dead end by you, would I have made such a painful decision? I think, in this world, no one would be willing to abandon a home and the family around them." The white-haired old man cried sadly. "Yes. Who wants to leave home? Leave family? But in this world, there are too many helplessness." Qin Feiyang sighed inwardly. The white-haired old man's words deeply touched his heartstrings. However, Gua Cheng and Gua Shan's faces were gloomy. "I have abandoned my family and the village. Now that there are no more false gods here, can we only hand in 50 soul stones like in previous years?" The white-haired old man looked at the two and said, "Haha." Gua Cheng and Gua Shan looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. However, their laughter was full of sarcasm. "Old thing, do you think you can reduce the soul stones by playing tricks? Let me tell you, stop dreaming. Even if you leave, this village must hand in 100 soul stones in the future," Gua Cheng said. "Gua Cheng, not 100. You have to increase the price. In the future, this village must hand in 150 soul stones every year. This is the price of playing tricks," Gua Shan said. Gua Cheng was slightly stunned and laughed. "Good idea, it's decided. Qi Yuan, prepare 150 soul stones for us on this day next year. If there is one less, we will kill one of you. 150 soul stones." Qi Yuan's face was dull and disheartened. The villagers below were also filled with anger and despair. "This is too much, too much." Fire Lotus looked at this scene and muttered to herself, a trace of murderous intent surging in her eyes. This was simply treating the villagers as fish to be slaughtered. However, Gua Cheng and Gua Shan's faces were full of sneers. "Let's see if you dare to be rash in the future. Let's go." Gua Cheng smiled contemptuously and turned to leave with Gua Shan. "Stop." But at this moment, the white-haired old man suddenly roared. The two stopped and turned to look at the white-haired old man with a cold expression. The white-haired old man stared at the two of them, like a wild beast that was about to go crazy, and said word by word, "You really don't want to give us a way out? You asked for it." Gua Cheng snorted coldly. "Good. Very good. Very good." The white-haired old man nodded with a smile, and then suddenly roared in anger. "If you don't give us a way out, you can forget about living." Boom. The white-haired old man took a step towards Gua Cheng and Gua Shan, and a destructive aura rushed out from his body. Self-destruction. "Old man, are you crazy?" Gua Cheng and Gua Shan turned pale with fright. "Yes. I am crazy, but it's because of you," the white-haired old man roared. Don't, let's talk things over." The two of them shouted as they fled in fear. "There's nothing to talk about. For this village, for these family members, I have to stand up bravely. I believe that after I self-destruct, the people in the other villages will slowly wake up and rebel against the Gua family. One day, the Gua family will pay the price for everything you've done." The white-haired old man roared, and there was no fear on his face. Shua. But just as the white-haired old man was about to self-destruct, a young figure suddenly appeared behind him. It was Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang raised his arm and gently pressed on the white-haired old man's shoulder. The white-haired old man's self-destruction was forcefully stopped. The white-haired old man was stunned, and he turned to look at Qin Feiyang. "My lord, what are you doing?" Qin Feiyang smiled. "Old man, life is so precious. How can you seek your own death? The white-haired old man sighed. My lord, I don't want to either, but as you can see, I can only do this. Don't worry. There's always a way out. Qin Feiyang smiled and looked at Guocheng and Guoshan. He flicked his finger, and a strand of divine power shot out. After the white-haired old man stopped self-destructing, the two of them immediately activated a teleportation altar. The divine power blasted out, and the awakened altar shattered. The two of them stood awkwardly in the air and looked at Qin Feiyang. Your Excellency, please don't meddle in other people's business. I have a bad habit. Whenever I see someone bullying others, I can't help but attack. Moreover, I owe Qi Yuan a favor. I can't just sit by and watch. Qin Feiyang smiled. Oh. The two of them were suspicious. How could Qi Yuan be related to a war god? However, Qi Yuan himself was also suspicious. Why didn't he know that this young man owed him a favor? Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and smiled. Before you came, Qi Yuan gave me a teleportation altar. What? Giving you a teleportation altar is considered a favor? The two of them were stunned. Although a teleportation altar is nothing, it's still a favor. A drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Qin Feiyang said. My lord, you. Qi Yuan looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze. He didn't know what to say. Leave this to me. Qin Feiyang smiled at Qi Yuan. Is this okay? They're from the Guo family. The Guo family not only has dozens of war gods, but their patriarch, Guo Zixiong, is also a great success war god. Moreover, the old patriarch of the Guo family is even stronger. He's a perfect war god. The white-haired old man said worriedly. Literature Center. Chapter 1929. After the white-haired elder finished speaking, before Qin Feiyang could say anything, Guocheng and Qi Yuan sneered. Qi Yuan is right. Not only does our Guo family have dozens of war gods, but we also have a perfected war god. You better think carefully about what you should and shouldn't care about. Once they thought about their backing, the two of them became tough again. Sir, you should leave. The Guo family has swallowed the Gao family, and is even more powerful than before. Don't get yourself into trouble. Qi Yuan advised earnestly. If I leave now, what will you do? Continue to self-destruct. And the villagers below. If you really self-destruct and die together with these two, Guo Zixiong will not let them go. By then, the fate of your clansmen will be even more miserable. Qin Feiyang said. Qi Yuan's expression froze. He really hadn't thought about this. So let me do it. When Guo Zixiong comes to investigate, you can just say that I killed them. Guo Zixiong will not make things difficult for you and your clansmen. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. The white-haired elder hurriedly said. Sir, I can't let you take the blame. My conscience can't bear it. Conscience, Qin Feiyang muttered. In today's world, there were not many people with a conscience. This person was worthy of admiration. Qin Feiyang looked at Guocheng and Qi Yuan and smiled. So what if you're a perfected war god? His tone was light and his expression was calm. He did not take it to heart at all. Fire Lotus had already told him that this old patriarch was Guo Zixiong's father. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, the white-haired elder was stunned. So what if you're a perfected war god? How could you say such disdainful words? Could it be that this young man is also a perfected war god, and is even stronger than the old patriarch of the Guo family? Guocheng and Qi Yuan's expressions froze. It seemed that they had encountered a tough opponent this time. The two of them scanned their surroundings, looking for a way out. Stop looking, you have no way out. Fire Lotus took a step forward and appeared behind the two of them. The power of the dead rolled out and directly wiped out their souls. This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at Fire Lotus helplessly and said, Oh my god, why are you in such a hurry to kill them? Didn't you want to kill them? I'm just doing it on your behalf. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Of course I have to kill them, but I want to read their memories first to see what kind of person Guo Zixiong is. Qin Feiyang sighed. Fire Lotus was stunned and said unhappily, Why didn't you say so earlier? Alright, it's my fault. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly. He glanced at the two fallen Guocheng and said, However, these two probably don't know much. He really killed him. However, the white-haired old man and the villagers below all looked at Guocheng and Guoshan's corpses in shock. They originally thought that Qin Feiyang and Guoshan were just scaring Guocheng and Guoshan, but they didn't expect that. In the end, they killed them without any hesitation. Who exactly were this man and woman? They weren't even afraid of the Guo family. Bang! Guocheng and Guoshan's corpses fell to the ground below. Qin Feiyang took a step forward and landed in front of the two. After searching their bodies for a while, he took out 2 qianquan bags. Huo Lian also landed beside him in a single step. The white-haired old man also hurriedly flew towards the two. Qin Feiyang checked the 2 qianquan bags and looked at Fire Lotus with a smile. Not bad. There should be more than 10,000 soul stones in Guoshan's qianquan bag. I didn't expect this either. There are more than 500 villages under the Guo family's rule. One village has 50 soul stones. More than 500 villages have more than 20,000 soul stones. And here, there are only more than 10,000 soul stones. This means that they haven't finished collecting them. The white-haired old man said. Every year, they can reap more than 20,000 soul stones without any effort. The Guo family is indeed the embodiment of the law of the jungle. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. In addition to the 10,000 soul stones, there were more than 200 divine gems and 2 teleportation altars in the 2 qianquan bags. In addition, there were some pills. However, they were only pills with 2 or 3 elixir veins. They weren't very valuable. Qin Feiyang took out a divine gem and looked at it with a frown. What's wrong? Fire Lotus was suspicious. Look, the 2 false divinities only added up to a little over 200 deity crystals. It seems that 1,000 divine gems is indeed a big fortune in the ancient world. Qin Feiyang thought. There must be a lot of divine gems in the Guo family's treasure vault. You might as well marry Guo Zixiong's daughter. Then, you'll get a lot of wealth without any effort. Fire Lotus snickered. Am I the kind of person who would reap without any effort? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at her. Yes. Fire Lotus nodded seriously. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. But you did remind me. If the marriage contract is fake, then I'll have to take a look at the Guo family's treasure vault. See, you still want to reap without any effort. Fire Lotus rolled her eyes. How is this the same? Qin Feiyang helplessly took out 1,000 soul stones and smiled at the white-haired old man. These 1,000 soul stones should be enough for you to become a warlord. Take them. The white-haired old man looked at the soul stones and waved his hand. I don't dare to take these soul stones. Sir has already helped us a lot. If I take these soul stones, am I still human? Just take them. When you become stronger, take good care of your family. Qin Feiyang smiled and sent the 2 qianquan bags to the castle. Then he left with Fire Lotus. The white-haired old man looked at the 1,000 soul stones in front of him. He was so emotional that tears flowed down his face. Suddenly, he raised his head to look at the backs of Qin Feiyang and the other man and shouted, Sirs, can you tell me your names? Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said without turning his head. Thank you, young Master Qin. The white-haired old man bowed deeply at the backs of the two. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Dage, you're so kind. I thought you were going to take all the soul stones. This Qi Yuan has a good heart. It's okay to give him some soul stones. Qin Feiyang faintly smiled. Then, are we still going to the Gao family? Fire Lotus asked. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, Let's go and have a look. Maybe we can still meet Guo Zixiong in the Gao family. After saying that, Qin Feiyang opened a teleportation altar. The two walked up one after another. Soon, they landed in the sky above a plain. The plain was about 12 miles wide, but there were big and small pits everywhere. These were the traces left behind by the battle. In the middle of the plain, there was a city. The city was not big. It covered an area of about a few miles. Like the plain, it was also broken and filled with a tragic aura. And there were many corpses and blood on the ground. And in the city, Qin Feiyang could also sense the aura of dozens of false gods. They were cleaning the battlefield. Needless to say, these faux divinities were from the Guo family. Because Guocheng had said before that except for the 2 people named Gao Guofang and Gao Xiaowei, Everyone in the Gao family had been slaughtered by the Guo family. The Guo family is really ruthless. Looking at the devastated city, Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. Even mortals have disputes, let alone cultivators. Things like this are basically happening all the time. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang nodded. Indeed. The path of cultivation was crueler than anything else. Qin Feiyang did not release his spirit sense. He used his perception to sense the aura in the city. After a while, Qin Feiyang frowned and said, I can't sense the aura of Guozixiong and Guoda, but there is the aura of a war god in the city. And this aura isn't weak. I can sense it too. It seems to be a low-level war god. Fire Lotus whispered. The two of them were about to fly into the city. But suddenly, in the sky above the plain opposite the city, a black-clothed man flew through the air like lightning and landed in the sky above the city. He shouted, Miss, I found the whereabouts of Gao Guofeng and Gao Xiaowei. So, at that moment, a figure flew up into the sky. It was a red-haired woman. She was also wearing a fiery red dress. She was about 1.78 meters tall and had an excellent figure. Her facial features were also quite exquisite. From afar, she looked like a fairy standing in flames. However, her expression was somewhat cold, giving off a cold feeling that kept people thousands of miles away. Where? The woman looked at the black-clothed man, her eyes flashing with a cold light, and asked. The black-clothed man said, They are hiding in the Scarlet Flame Valley and are healing their injuries. Take me there immediately. The woman said. Yes. The black-clothed man respectfully replied, turned around, and flew in the direction he came from. The woman took a step forward, but suddenly seemed to have sensed something. She turned her head and looked in the direction of Qin Feiyang and the other person. But there was nothing in the void. Miss, what's wrong? The black-clothed man looked at the woman in confusion. Nothing? The woman shook her head and suspiciously glanced at the void. Then, she turned around and followed the black-clothed man. In the void, Fire Lotus looked at the woman's back, then turned her head to Qin Feiyang and asked suspiciously, Why did you use the invisibility technique? Qin Feiyang said, I'm thinking that woman might be Guozixiong's daughter. Guozixiong's daughter? Fire Lotus was a bit surprised. Qin Feiyang asked doubtfully, Didn't you go to the Guo family? Why don't you know what she looks like? I did go to the Guo family, but I didn't see Guozixiong's daughter. If that woman is really Guozixiong's daughter, then you're really lucky. Fire Lotus mocked. Lucky? Qin Feiyang was stunned. What did she mean? Think about it. His daughter is so young, but she broke through to the low-level war god realm. It shows how terrifying her talent is. Facing such a beautiful girl, even if the marriage contract was forged by the Guo family, I'll still marry her. Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. A row of black lines appeared on Qin Feiyang's forehead as he speechlessly said, Then go ahead and marry her. I absolutely won't stop you. Then I'm curious. If you don't plan to marry her, then why are you avoiding her? Fire Lotus said. I just want to see if she's really Guozixiong's daughter or not. If she is, then she must know about the marriage contract. If the marriage contract is fake, then I'll just show up. She won't tell the truth. Qin Feiyang said. I see. Fire Lotus suddenly smiled and teased. I thought you were shy because you met your future wife. You really know how to talk nonsense. Qin Feiyang looked at her helplessly. He waved his hand and rolled up Fire Lotus. Then he used the Xing technique and chased after the woman and the black-clothed man. Literature Center. Chapter 1930. The Xing character formula is a heaven-defying formula. In less than 10 breaths, Qin Feiyang took the Fire Lotus and caught up with the red-clothed woman and the black-clothed man. Then he followed them. The red-clothed woman and the black-clothed man didn't notice him at all. About 500 to 600 breaths passed. A huge valley came into sight. Around the valley, waves of fire rolled and black smoke curled up. There were no plants within a radius of dozens of miles. Crimson lava flowed and waves of heat surged, turning this place into a huge furnace. The lava came from the valley. In the middle of the valley, there was a crater with a diameter of 5 to 6 meters. Occasionally, lava would spurt out. Miss, they are in a cave on the left side of the crater. The black-clothed man pointed and said in a low voice. The two of them also concealed their presence. The red-clothed woman looked at the direction the black-clothed man pointed, but didn't see the so-called cave. She asked, "Are you sure where they are?" The black-clothed man said, "I'm sure. I also saw Gao Shaohui use lava to seal the entrance with my own eyes." "That's good. Back off." The red-clothed woman waved her hand. Her eyes were filled with coldness. The black-clothed man said, "Miss, be careful." "I'm fine." Although Gao Guofeng is a perfect war god, his soul was damaged when he fought grandfather last night. His vitality was greatly damaged. If he had a life pill, he would have recovered by now. Unfortunately, both his and Gao Shaohui's universe rings were destroyed last night. So the current Gao Guofeng is nothing to worry about. As for Gao Shaohui, although she isn't injured, she is just a beginner war god. I can kill her with a wave of my hand. The red-clothed woman said with contempt. Perfect war god, Qin Feiyang thought. So the Gao family also has a perfect war god. No wonder the three young men he met not long ago said that the Gao family and the Guo family were equal in strength. Miss is mighty, the black-clothed man said flatteringly, and then retreated silently. Gao Guofeng, Gao Shaohui, the red-clothed woman muttered. She stepped out and landed on top of the crater. She looked down coldly and said, "Gao Shaohui, come out." But after a while, no other sound could be heard. "Looks like you'll only come out if I do it." The woman in red raised her slender finger, and a surge of divine energy suddenly surged out. It turned into a wave of fire that blasted into the valley below. Accompanied by a loud bang, the valley instantly split apart and collapsed crazily. The surging magma was like a fountain as it gushed out from the ground. Black smoke enveloped the entire area. Qin Feiyang looked at Fire Lotus and said with a smile, "Let's back off a little." Fire Lotus nodded. The two of them retreated 50 to 60 miles and stood in the void, watching from afar. To a mortal, it would take several hours to cover a distance of 50 to 60 kilometers even if they ran nonstop. However, to Qin Feiyang and Huolian it was nothing. They could teleport away. Furthermore, with their current eyesight, they could see everything clearly even from tens of thousands of miles away. Just as the two of them retreated, two figures suddenly rushed out of the black smoke. It was an old man and a young woman. Although the old man was old, he had a ruddy complexion and white hair, and his body was quite strong. And the young woman was about the same as the woman in red. Her appearance was also quite good. She was more than 1.7 meters tall and was extremely slender. Her jet black hair was tied together, making her look full of heroic spirit. Her skin was also very soft. However, the old man and the young woman were in a sorry state at the moment. Especially the old man. His body was covered in blood, his eyes were dim and lifeless, and there was a sense of weakness between his eyebrows that couldn't be dissolved. After the two of them appeared, they didn't bother with the woman in red. They didn't even say a word and directly teleported away. However, there was a trace of fear on their faces. "Gao Guofeng, you're a perfect war god. Facing a junior like me, you actually ran away without fighting. Aren't you afraid of being laughed at?" The woman in red said mockingly. She took a step forward and her speed instantly increased by several times. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of Gao Guofeng and Gao Guofeng. The two of them braked and stopped in the void. Gao Shaohui immediately glared at the woman in red and shouted, "Guosweki, don't go too far." "Guosweki," Qin Feiyang mumbled. So that was the name of the woman in red. Guosweki looked at Gao Shaohui expressionlessly, and then shifted her gaze to Gao Guofeng. After observing carefully for a while, she said, "As I expected, your divine soul hasn't been repaired. Even if it hasn't been repaired, it's not something that a little kid like you can block." Gao Guofeng shouted furiously, and there was a hint of anger in his tone. His divine power was like a tide that carried a terrifying aura as it rushed toward Guosweki. Guosweki's eyes flickered. She seemed to be hesitating whether to fight head-on. Suddenly, a cold light flashed across her eyes. She raised her hand, and a flame-like divine power appeared. It roared in the sky and collided with Gao Guofeng's divine power. Boom! A loud explosion that shook the sky suddenly exploded. A wave of destructive energy surged out in all directions. The land within a radius of tens of thousands of miles was razed to the ground. Dust and smoke covered the sky. Qin Feiyang also went to the Black Tortoise world with the Fire Lotus. This was because once they were affected by the fluctuations of battle, the concealment technique would disappear. However, it was different in the Black Tortoise world. No matter how Guosweki and the other two fought, even if they self-destructed, it wouldn't affect them. Outside, when the dust settled, Guosweki was pushed back dozens of miles. Her face was pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. The skin on her arm was also cracked. Blood dripped down from her fingertips. However, Guosweki ignored this injury and stared at Gao Guofeng, who was standing in the void opposite her. Gao Guofeng stood firmly in the void and didn't even move a step. He didn't look any different from when he first appeared. The aura exuding from his body was extremely terrifying. How is this possible? Last night, I saw with my own eyes that his divine soul was damaged and he could only use the strength of a beginner god of war. But now he actually pushed me back. Could it be? His divine soul has been repaired. Guosweki muttered to herself and looked at Gao Guofeng with a face full of shock. Gao Xiaohui glanced at Guosweki and ran to Gao Guofeng's side and asked, "Grandpa, are you okay?" Gao Guofeng waved his hand and said with a hoarse smile, "Don't worry, Grandpa is fine." Guosweki raised her eyebrows and said, "Your Qiankuan ring was destroyed and you didn't have the life elixir. How could you repair your divine soul so quickly?" "Little girl, you are still too young. Although the Qiankuan ring was destroyed, the life elixir is such an important elixir. I will definitely store it elsewhere." Gao Guofeng sneered. Damn it. Guosweki cursed in her heart. If Gao Guofeng's divine soul hadn't been repaired, she wouldn't be afraid at all. However, once Gao Guofeng's divine soul was repaired, it would be easy for him to kill her with his cultivation as a perfect god of war. Immediately, she had the thought of retreating. Wait. But suddenly, she looked Gao Guofeng up and down again. Something was wrong. If Gao Guofeng's divine soul had really been repaired, why did he take Gao Xiaohui and run away? Logically speaking, if Gao Guofeng's divine soul had been repaired, given the deep hatred between the two families, he should immediately take the initiative to kill her. Or take her captive and use her as a bargaining chip to threaten the Guo family. But now, although Gao Guofeng was overbearing, he still had the intention to take the initiative to attack. Suddenly, Guosweki showed a look of realization. Her red lips curled up slightly as she wiped the blood on her hands and said with a smile, "You are indeed an old fox. I almost fell for your trick." Hearing this, a look of panic flashed across Gao Guofeng's face. Obviously, his divine soul hadn't been repaired. However, on the surface, his expression didn't change. He put his hands behind his back and pretended to be calm as he looked at Guosweki and asked, "What do you mean? If your divine soul has been repaired, why are you still standing there and not doing anything? If I am not wrong, your situation is worse than mine in the confrontation just now. Stop pretending. Your divine soul hasn't been repaired at all." Guosweki sneered. The Black Tortoise world. Looking at Guosweki and Gao Guofeng, Qin Feiyang said with a smile, "The people in this ancient world are indeed not simple characters." Fire Lotus was stunned. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Qin Dage isn't afraid, is he?" "Afraid?" Qin Feiyang smiled. In terms of scheming, he really wasn't afraid of anyone. Outside, hearing Guosweki's words, Gao Guofeng's expression still didn't change. His aura became more and more terrifying. He had to continue pretending, because only by scaring away Guosweki could he and his granddaughter Gao Xiaohui live. However, his weak body didn't allow it. Puff. The blood that had been held in his throat suddenly spurted out. His face instantly became pale. His body kept shaking. Even standing seemed to be very difficult. Gao Xiaohui's expression changed. She quickly stretched out her hands and grabbed Gao Guofeng's arm. "Finally, you can't pretend anymore." Guosweki's face was full of ridicule. Gao Guofeng smiled bitterly and turned to look at Gao Xiaohui. He said with a face full of guilt, "Xiaohui, I'm sorry. Grandpa is too useless. I can't even protect you." "Grandpa, don't say that. I'm the useless one. Gao Xiaohui shook her head and tears flowed down. The Gao family only has today's achievements and status because of our ancestors' hard work. But I didn't expect that it would all be destroyed by my hands overnight. Xiaohui, Grandpa is the sinner of the Gao family. Gao Guofeng cried out in grief. Grandpa, cheer up. You still have me. Gao Xiaohui cried out. Then she turned around and protected Gao Guofeng behind her. She said without turning her head. Grandpa, I will protect you. Looking at his granddaughter in front of him, Gao Guofeng undoubtedly blamed himself. He actually needed his granddaughter to protect him. He was a perfect war god. Where was his face? Gao Guofeng pushed Gao Xiaohui away and roared. Xiaohui, you are our Gao family's only hope now. You can't die here. Grandpa will hold her back. Run and find your brother. Ask him to avenge us. No one can escape. Guosweki smiled coldly. Chapter 1931. Accompanied by a loud clanging sound, a world-destroying sharpness appeared in front of him. Following that, a thin red sword appeared in Guosweki's hand. The thin sword looked like it was made of magma. The fire dragon was engraved on the sword hilt. The fire dragon divine sword. Looking at the thin sword, Gao Guofeng's face changed. He shouted anxiously, Xiaohui, don't hesitate. Hurry. I can't leave you behind, grandfather. Gao Xiaohui shook her head. Looking at Gao Guofeng and Guosweki, there was a trace of fear for the fire dragon divine sword. But more than that, there was a reluctance to leave Gao Guofeng. Clang. The fire dragon divine sword in Guosweki's hand had awakened. The aura was shocking, like a tide, covering the sky and shattering the earth. High-grade divine weapon. Black Tortoise World. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. Even the Guo family's patriarch, Guo Zixiong, only has a middle-grade divine weapon, but this girl has a high-grade divine weapon. Looks like Guosweki's status in the Guo family isn't low. Qin Dage, if you really become the Guo family's son-in-law, your future will be limitless. Fire Lotus said with a smile. Qin Feiyang heard this and felt helpless. Outside, facing Gao Xiaohui's stubbornness, Gao Guofeng was both touched and anxious. He was touched because of his granddaughter's filial piety. He was anxious because if Gao Xiaohui didn't leave, both of them would die here. All these years the Guo family and Gao family had been at odds. Because of this, Gao Guofeng knew everyone in the Guo family like the back of his hand. After all, there was a good saying. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will win every battle. He had watched Guosweki grow up, so he knew Guosweki very well. Although she was beautiful, she had a heart as venomous as a snake and scorpion. Once he was killed, he would never show mercy to his granddaughter, Gao Xiaohui. Clang. Guosweki looked coldly at the grandfather and granddaughter duo. She shook the fire dragon divine sword in her hand, and thousands of sword qi roared out, forming a huge fire dragon. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it pounced towards the duo. The appearance of the fire dragon also meant that the power of the fire dragon divine sword had recovered to its peak state. Seeing this, Gao Guofeng immediately pushed Gao Xiaohui away and shouted, Xiaohui, now is not the time to be sentimental. Let's go, we must find your big brother. Then, like a moth darting into a flame, he pounced towards the fire dragon formed by the sword qi. Grandpa! Gao Xiaohui screamed in despair. Go! Gao Guofeng roared without turning his head. Tears streamed down Gao Xiaohui's face as she stared at Gao Guofeng's back. Then, she turned around and fled into the depths of the mountain. Guosweki saw it all, but she didn't care about Gao Xiaohui. She took a step forward and charged towards Gao Guofeng with a cold expression. Her black hair danced in the wind and her clothes fluttered in the wind. She looked like a merciless goddess. Guosweki, my Gao family has not perished yet. Your Guo family will definitely pay the price for the sins you have committed today. Gao Guofeng roared angrily, and with what little divine power he had left, he blasted towards the fire dragon. After all, he was a perfect war god. Although his divine soul was damaged and he was unable to unleash his peak strength, he was still not to be underestimated. Boom! Accompanied by an earth-shaking explosion, the fire dragon formed by the sword qi let out a wail and dissipated in the air. But at the same time, Gao Guofeng's body trembled as he spat out blood. His old face was completely drained of blood. Even with his divine soul damaged, he can still display such terrifying strength. As expected of the old patriarch of the Gao family. However, this is probably your last bit of strength. Die. Guosweki was as cold as ice as she landed in front of Gao Guofeng. The fire dragon divine sword shone brightly and slashed forward. Immediately, Gao Guofeng let out an unwilling scream as his divine body was sliced into two by the fire dragon divine sword. Grandfather! Hearing Gao Guofeng's scream, Gao Xiaowei turned around and saw the scene. She was instantly enraged. However, she did not stop and continued to escape with all her might. Strange, Black Tortoise World. Fire Lotus looked at Gao Guofeng's corpse with a hint of suspicion in her eyes. What's strange? Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at her suspiciously. Why didn't Gao Guofeng self-destruct? Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well self-destruct and die together with Guosweki. Fire Lotus said. Because of Gao Xiaowei. Gao Xiaowei hasn't escaped far. If he self-destructs, it will definitely affect Gao Xiaowei. Qin Feiyang smiled. That's true. Fire Lotus was stunned. She nodded and smiled. Then she asked suspiciously, Qin Dage, aren't you going to help the Gao family? Help the Gao family? Why should I help them? Qin Feiyang was puzzled. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of the Gao family, and the Guo family is naturally our friend. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He helplessly said. Although the Guo family's conduct isn't that great, the matter of the marriage contract hasn't been investigated yet. It's still too early to say that the Guo family is our enemy. So Qin Dage still has some thoughts about the Guo family in his heart? Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. What thoughts? Qin Feiyang was confused. Playing dumb? Of course it's about Guosweki. Fire Lotus said. Qin Feiyang was helpless to the extreme. He really wanted to ruthlessly knock this woman's head. What was she thinking about all the time? However, as he spent more time with her, he realized that Fire Lotus was quite cute sometimes. Outside, the ground was in pieces. The magma was boiling. It was a scene of devastation. Gao Guofeng's body had already fallen and was swallowed by the red magma. Guosweki looked down coldly. Then she grabbed the fire dragon divine sword and chased after Gao Xiaowei. The black-clothed man standing in the distance also immediately chased after her. Qin Feiyang also controlled the Black Tortoise realm and silently followed behind Guosweki. In front, Gao Xiaowei felt Guosweki's aura. Her pale face was filled with panic and fear. Guosweki was an initial stage war god. Although she was also a war god, she was only an initial stage war god. Although there was only a difference of one stage, it was like an insurmountable chasm. Whether it was strength or speed, Guosweki surpassed her by too much. If this continued, she would not be able to escape. Whoosh. As expected. In less than 100 breaths, Guosweki relied on her suppressive speed to block in front of Gao Xiaowei. Gao Xiaowei slammed on the brakes and looked around in panic. Then, she looked at Guosweki and said angrily, Don't go too far. Go too far? Guosweki sneered. Her eyes were filled with disdain. Think about it. You've been competing with me in secret all these years. You don't want to lose to me. But in the end, I've always been stronger than you. Gao Xiaowei clenched her fists and said angrily, Are you humiliating me? Humiliating you? The Gao family is already destroyed. You're no longer the young miss of the Gao family. You're not worthy to be my opponent. What's the point of me humiliating you? Guosweki said indifferently. Gao Xiaowei's face was red. She was ashamed and angry. I just want to tell you something. In this world, there will only be one genius. No matter how hard others work, they're just green leaves. Guosweki said. What an arrogant woman. Black Tortoise Realm. Qin Feiyang muttered. Fire Lotus said. Although she's a bit arrogant, her words are reasonable. Qin Feiyang nodded. Outside, the black-clothed man also caught up and blocked Gao Xiaowei's path. Gao Xiaowei glanced at the black-clothed man, then looked at Guosweki and said, Today I'm in your hands. You can kill me or torture me. But there's a question that I can't figure out. The black-clothed man sneered. Young miss, don't talk nonsense with her. Guosweki glanced at the confused Gao Xiaowei and waved her hand at the black-clothed man. Then she looked at Gao Xiaohui and said, "Speak. The strength of our two families has always been on par. But why was my father's army wiped out in the land of the dead?" Gao Xiaohui said. Hearing this, Guosweki lowered her head. Her eyes flickered. Seeing that Guosweki was silent, the black-clothed man stared at Gao Xiaohui arrogantly and said, "Nonsense. Of course it's because the Guo family is stronger than the Gao family." "Impossible. In this battle in the land of the dead, both our families have the same number of people and divine weapons. Even if the Gao family loses, it's impossible for them to be wiped out." Gao Xiaohui shouted. "Battle?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. What was going on? Originally, he had thought that the Guo and Gao families were fighting over something in the land of the undead, and that was why they were fighting. But he did not expect it to be a battle. Then why did these two great clans want to fight? To fight for territory? That seemed to be the case. Because now all the villages controlled by the Gao family had been taken over by the Guo family. Guosweki was silent for a long time. Then she looked up at Gao Xiaohui and said coldly, "A loss is a loss. Why are you still asking so many questions?" Gao Xiaohui shouted, "I don't believe that the Guo family has the ability. So, you must have used some despicable means." "How dare you? The Guo family is upright. How can we use despicable means as you think?" Guosweki said angrily. Gao Xiaohui said, "Since you are upright, why are you beating around the bush?" "I'm not." Guosweki shook her head. "Haha. Guosweki, I didn't expect there to be something that you can't talk about. It seems that the Guo family's victory is not glorious." Gao Xiaohui laughed out loud, his face full of mockery. Hearing this, Guosweki clenched her fingers and said in a low voice, "Fine, I'll tell you. The reason why the Gao family was wiped out in the land of the dead was because of one person." "Because of one person?" Gao Xiaohui was stunned. She said angrily, "Who is so capable?" "My..." Guosweki took a deep breath and said, "My fiancé." "Fiancé?" Gao Xiaohui's face was full of surprise. She asked, "Why didn't I know that you have a fiancé?" "I didn't know before. Grandfather and father only told me about it recently." Guosweki sighed. "Fiancé," Gao Xiaohui murmured and smiled sadly. "I didn't expect that the Guo family would have such a powerful person." "Shut up. I, Guosweki, don't need to rely on anyone. Even without him, with my talent, I can destroy the Gao family sooner or later," Guosweki shouted. Literature Center. Chapter 1932. Qindage. Why do I feel like your fiancé is a disgrace in her eyes? Fire Lotus looked at Guosweki and asked suspiciously. She's not only an arrogant woman. She's also a very conceited and prideful woman. She doesn't want people to say that the Guo family relied on me to get rid of the Gao family. So, when Gao Xiaohui said that the Guo family had hooked up with a powerful person, to her the word hooked up is a disgrace. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "So you're saying that she's unhappy that you interfered with the Guo and Gao family in the land of the dead?" Fire Lotus was stunned. Qin Feiyang nodded. "She really doesn't know what's good for her." Fire Lotus shook her head. If it wasn't for Qin Feiyang, the final outcome would have been unpredictable. "Actually, I don't care about any of this. I just want to know if the marriage contract is real or fake." But now it seems that Guosweki doesn't know either. Qin Feiyang frowned. Outside, Gao Xiaohui looked at Guosweki and said, "I have no more questions, please give me a quick death." "Okay." Guosweki nodded. The fire dragon divine sword in her hand emitted a destructive aura. However, just as she raised the fire dragon divine sword, just as Gao Xiaohui was about to die under the sword, she suddenly disappeared without a trace. And Guosweki's arm froze. The fire dragon divine sword stopped in the air and immediately released her divine sense in all directions. At the same time, the black-robed man's expression changed greatly, and he also released his divine sense. But the two of them searched tens of thousands of miles and didn't find the aura of a stranger, nor any traces of a spatial divine object. "Miss, what's going on?" The black-robed man ran in front of Guosweki and exclaimed. "Strange?" Guosweki didn't answer. She looked around at the void, her bright eyes full of suspicion. The Black Tortoise World. A woman suddenly appeared in front of Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. It was Gao Xiaowei. That was right. The person who saved Gao Xiaowei from Guosweki's sword was Qin Feiyang. At this moment, Gao Xiaowei also sized up this unfamiliar place with a look of surprise and bewilderment. Fire Lotus glanced at Gao Xiaowei and asked through telepathy, "Qin Dage, why are you saving her again?" Qin Feiyang secretly laughed and said, "The heavens are virtuous." When Fire Lotus heard this, she pouted. "Who are you? Where is this?" At this moment, Gao Xiaowei retracted her gaze and looked at Qin Feiyang warily. "Don't worry. If we wanted to harm you, we wouldn't have saved you just now," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Gao Xiaowei did not let her guard down because of this. She asked curiously, "Why did you save me? I don't even know you." "We really don't know each other, but saving a life is better than building a 7-floor pagoda. Just think of me as a good person," Qin Feiyang said. "Good person?" Gao Xiaowei sized up the two and said with a flattering smile, "Don't pretend. What is your purpose? Just tell me. In this world, who wasn't selfish? How could there be a good person? It's so hard to be a good person. It's really frustrating." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. "It's not that it's hard to be a good person. It's just that you look like a bad person." Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head helplessly. He looked at Gao Xiaowei and said, "Take us to the Guo family." "The Guo family?" Gao Xiaowei was slightly surprised and said, "Why are you going to the Guo family? Did these two have a grudge against the Guo family?" "That's none of your business. As long as we go to the Guo family, I will let you go," Qin Feiyang said. Gao Xiaowei was taken aback and quickly asked, "Really?" "A gentleman never goes back on his word," Qin Feiyang said and looked up at the image in the sky. Guosweki had already left with the man in black. Gao Xiaowei also looked at Guosweki's back and asked suspiciously, "Brother, where are we now? Why can't Guosweki's immortal will find us?" "Here." Qin Feiyang's eyes twinkled and said with a smile, "You are in my divine dimension item." "Divine dimension item?" Gao Xiaowei looked around in shock and mumbled, "A divine dimension item can escape the detection of a mortal will. Maybe it's because my divine dimension item's level is a bit high, so immortal will can't find it." Qin Feiyang smiled. "A divine dimension item that immortal will can't find? What level is it?" Gao Xiaowei was so shocked that she couldn't close her mouth. Fire Lotus was speechless. She actually believed your nonsense. How naive is this girl? How can anyone who has reached the divine war realm be naive? She didn't believe me at all. She's just pretending to be naive because she's in our hands, Qin Feiyang said telepathically. "Pretending to be naive?" Fire Lotus glanced at Gao Xiaowei and her eyes twinkled. "There's no need to expose her," Qin Feiyang said and then looked at Gao Xiaowei with a smile. "I'm a man of my words. Lead the way." Gao Xiaowei said, "Let's go southeast." Qin Feiyang immediately controlled the Black Tortoise world, and under Gao Xiaowei's guidance, it took them half an hour to arrive at a city. The city was located in the middle of a mountain, and was about a dozen miles in size. Every street in the city was bustling with activity. Looking at the city outside through the Black Tortoise world, Gao Xiaowei's eyes were filled with hatred. "Do you hate the Guo family?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. "Of course. My Gao clan used to be as prosperous as this, but in a single night, we were all massacred. The Guo family is despicable. Guosweki's fiancé is even more despicable." Gao Xiaowei clenched her fists and said. Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked calmly, "Why do you hate Guosweki's fiancé?" "If it wasn't for him, would my father and the others have been wiped out in the land of the dead? If my father and the others hadn't died, would the Guo family have slaughtered my people and destroyed my family's land?" Gao Xiaowei said angrily. "You can't blame him for this. After all, he's Guosweki's fiancé. It's natural for him to help the Guo family deal with your Gao family," Qin Feiyang said. "What do you mean natural? He and Guosweki aren't even married yet. What right does he have to interfere with the grudges between our families?" Gao Xiaowei glared at Qin Feiyang and said, Okay. Take it that I've said too much. Forget it." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand and drove the Black Tortoise realm into the city. Wait. Didn't you say that you would let me go after we arrived at the Guo family? Gao Xiaohui said hurriedly. Are you sure you want to go out? Qin Feiyang asked. Yes. Gao Xiaohui nodded. She felt that the man and woman in front of her were a little too mysterious. It was better to leave as soon as possible. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile. Okay, I'll send you out now. Now. Gao Xiaohui was stunned and immediately became angry. She shouted. You've already entered the city. Isn't sending me to my death if you send me out? Why are you so unreasonable? Didn't you say you wanted to go out? Qin Feiyang frowned. Gao Xiaohui was so angry that she gritted her teeth and trembled. She did say that she wanted to go out, but she didn't say that she wanted to go out here. How much time would it take if he sent her out of the city first? If you don't dare to go out, then shut up. Qin Feiyang glanced at her indifferently, and then carefully observed the situation in the city. There were more than 100,000 people in the entire city. Every one of them had the aura of cultivation. In other words, there wasn't a single mortal in this city. Moreover, he sensed hundreds of fake gods' auras. Hundreds of fake gods. Just the Guo family alone was already so powerful. The ancient world was truly a frightening place. Qin Feiyang controlled the Black Tortoise realm and flew straight to the center of the city, because in the central area, he sensed dozens of war gods' auras. One of them was especially terrifying. It was a perfect war god. Needless to say, the owner of this aura must be the Guo family's old patriarch. However, the old patriarch's aura revealed a trace of weakness. Very soon, Qin Feiyang controlled the Black Tortoise realm and landed in the sky above a courtyard. This courtyard was located in the center of the city and occupied a large area. There was a small stream, a rockery, a pavilion, and a garden. Beside one of the rockery, there was a two-story pavilion. The pavilion looked very old and the decorations were very simple, but it was very clean and tidy. It really surprised me, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. He thought that this place would be quite luxurious, but he didn't expect it to be so simple. The first impression it gave was quite good. That's not right. Why is this place different from what I've seen before? Gao Xiaohui's voice suddenly sounded. Qin Feiyang was stunned and turned to look at Gao Xiaohui. He saw Gao Xiaohui scanning the courtyard with a puzzled expression. What's different? Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously. I know the Guo family's situation very well. In the past, this place could be said to be filled with jewelry and splendor. Why has it become so simple now? What the hell is the Guo family doing? Are they hiding something? Gao Xiaohui shook her head with a puzzled expression. Filled with jewelry and splendor. What are they hiding? Qin Feiyang frowned. Gao Xiaohui's words were somewhat thought-provoking. Swish. Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared in the courtyard out of thin air. It was Guo Zixiong. Father. Guo Zixiong walked to the front of the pavilion and called out softly. Creak. After a while, the door of the pavilion opened, and a white-haired old man in black walked out slowly with a silver-white walking stick. Gao Xiaohui said, he is the old patriarch of the Guo family, Guo Sueqi's grandfather. Old patriarch. Qin Feiyang looked at the old man and Guo Zixiong, his eyes flickering. After the old patriarch came out, Guo Zixiong immediately went forward to support him and asked with concern, Father, how are your injuries? This Gao Guofang's strength is indeed not simple. Facing my attack, although he was not prepared at all, he still seriously injured me. The old patriarch sighed deeply and looked at Guo Zixiong with a smile. But don't worry, it's not a big problem. That's good. Guo Zixiong breathed a sigh of relief. The old patriarch asked, Have you found Gao Guofang and Gao Xiaohui? Chapter 1933. Guo Zixiong said. I came here to report this matter to you, father. Speak. The old patriarch said. Guo Zixiong said. Shueqi sent me a message saying that she found Gao Guofang and killed him. Good, good, good. That lass is indeed our Guo family's pride. The old patriarch was elated when he heard the news. Yes. Even though Gao Guofang's soul was damaged, his strength shouldn't be underestimated. Being able to kill him is enough to prove Shueqi's ability. Guo Zixiong said with a smile. It's all thanks to you, father. The old patriarch laughed heartily. Guo Zixiong hurriedly waved his hand and said, No, no, no. I don't dare to take all the credit. If you hadn't spent so much effort to nurture Xueqi, would she have her current achievements? You stinking brat, why are you still being so polite with me? The old patriarch rolled his eyes at Guo Zixiong. Guo Zixiong smiled embarrassedly and said, But what? The old patriarch was suspicious. The smile on Guo Zixiong's face disappeared, and he said solemnly, Gao Shaohui didn't die. What? Gao Guofeng died, so why didn't Gao Shaohui die? Did Gao Shaohui break through to the low-level war god realm? The old patriarch was shocked. No. Guo Zixiong shook his head. The old patriarch was puzzled. If she didn't break through, how did she escape from Xueqi's hands? Guo Zixiong said. According to Xueqi, she was rescued by someone. Someone? What does that mean? The old patriarch was puzzled. It means that Xueqi didn't see the person who rescued Gao Shaohui. She didn't even see his shadow. He just disappeared into thin air. Guo Zixiong said. Disappeared into thin air. The old patriarch muttered. His gaze was gloomy. Suddenly he thought of something and said in shock. Could it be Gao Xiaolong? Impossible. If it was Gao Xiaolong, he would definitely kill Xueqi before leaving. However, the person who rescued Gao Shaohui didn't make a move against Xueqi. Guo Zixiong shook his head. This is strange. If it wasn't Gao Xiaolong, who could it be? The old patriarch frowned. The Black Tortoise World. Qin Feiyang looked at Guo Zixiong and Gao Xiaolong on the screen and asked, Gao Shaohui, who is Gao Xiaolong? Gao Shaohui said, Gao Xiaolong is my older brother. Blood brother? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He turned to look at Gao Shaohui and said, The person your grandfather asked you to find is him? That's right. My brother is much stronger than Guo Xueqi. If my brother was here, the Guo family wouldn't dare to do anything to the Gao family even if they were given hundreds of guts. Gao Shaohui coldly snorted. Then where is he now? Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Gao Shaohui replied, 9 Heavens Palace. 9 Heavens Palace? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked at the fire lotus and asked, Where is the 9 Heavens Palace? I don't know either. Fire lotus shook her head. What? You don't even know about 9 Heavens Palace? Are you people from this continent or not? Gao Shaohui looked at the two of them in shock. Cough cough. Qin Feiyang coughed dryly and smiled. We siblings have been living in seclusion with our master since we were young, so we don't know anything about the outside world. Even if you live in seclusion, it's impossible for you not to know about 9 Heavens Palace. 9 Heavens Palace is very famous. In the entire northern region, who doesn't know about it? Gao Shaohui said. Qin Feiyang said calmly, It's that famous? Of course. 9 Heavens Palace is the strongest force in the northern region. It can even be said that it's the ruler of the northern region. The disciples of 9 Heavens Palace, no matter where they go, they are respected by thousands of people. And my brother is a disciple of 9 Heavens Palace. When he returned home last year, he had already broken through to the high-level war god realm. Gao Shaohui said proudly. So powerful? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus revealed a shocked expression, but they were pondering in their hearts. Outside, the old patriarch took a deep breath, raised his head and looked at Guo Zixiong. It's best if we can find Gao Shaohui, but it doesn't matter if we can't. The most important thing now is to quickly take over the Gao family's territory. What about Gao Xiaolong? This person is a disciple of 9 Heavens Palace, and his talent is outstanding. Keeping him alive will always be a threat. Guo Zixiong asked. Gao Xiaolong. The old patriarch pondered for a moment. A cold light flashed across his eyes, and he sneered. Don't worry, this old man has already made arrangements. Guo Zixiong was startled for a moment, then came to a realization and laughed. Father is indeed a treasured blade. Ha ha. The old patriarch laughed and said, Go and do your work. Yes. Guo Zixiong respectfully replied, then turned and left. Wait. But suddenly, the old patriarch called out to Guo Zixiong again. Guo Zixiong turned his head and asked suspiciously, Father, do you have any other orders? The old patriarch said. Is there still no news of Qin Feiyang? No. Guo Zixiong shook his head. It's already been a few days. Why is there still no news of him? Could it be that he has already died in that mountain range? The old patriarch was bewildered. I don't know. Guo Zixiong said. The old patriarch thought for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, No, this old man must go and take a look personally. Father, you mustn't. There are ferocious beasts everywhere in that mountain range. Not to mention that you are injured now. Even if you were in your peak condition, once you set foot in there, it would be difficult for you to escape unscathed. Guo Zixiong's face changed and he hurriedly said, Of course, this old man knows. But you know how important Qin Feiyang is to our Guo family. If something happens to him, then our efforts will be in vain. The old patriarch said in a low voice, I know. Guo Zixiong nodded, and after a moment of silence he smiled. Father, how about this, you rest well, and I will go and look for him. Okay. The old patriarch nodded and said, You must find him, and make sure that he and Xueqi get married smoothly. I understand. Guo Zixiong nodded. The old patriarch waved his hand, indicating for Guo Zixiong to leave, but then he suddenly said, Oh, by the way, does Xueqi have any objections to this marriage? Guo Zixiong sighed and said, This lass is somewhat resistant to it. For the sake of our Guo family's future, even if she is resistant, she must get married. After all, that marriage contract was forged with great difficulty by imitating Qin Beixian's handwriting, and it was also with great difficulty that I managed to make Qin Feiyang believe it. So we mustn't let this lass's stubbornness ruin all of our efforts. The old patriarch said. I understand, and I will try my best to persuade her. Guo Zixiong nodded and replied. Moreover, only Guo Dayu and I know whether the marriage contract is real or fake. You mustn't tell anyone else, especially Xueqi. Go. After the old patriarch spoke, he waved his hand. I will take my leave. Guo Zixiong bowed respectfully, then turned around and left with large strides. This marriage contract is really fake. The Black Tortoise whirled. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists, and his eyes flashed with shocking killing intent. So Guo Xueqi's fiancé is Qin Feiyang. That damned bastard. He harmed my Gao family. I will not let him off. Just as Qin Feiyang was feeling vexed, Gao Xiaohui's voice suddenly rang out. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Gao Xiaohui, and saw that her face was filled with resentment. Qin Feiyang could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. He did not expect to get into so much trouble as soon as he arrived in the ancient world. What a headache. Fire Lotus glanced at Gao Xiaohui and said telepathically, Qin Dage, the Gao family is really innocent. Qin Feiyang sighed and said, It's my fault. I acted rashly without investigating properly. Then what should we do now? Fire Lotus asked in her heart. Since they dared to trick me, they will have to pay the price. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with a cold light. I am asking Gao Xiaohui how to deal with this matter. Fire Lotus said in her heart. Qin Feiyang glanced at Gao Xiaohui and frowned. Gao Xiaohui did not know that the enemy she was looking for was right next to her. She lowered her head and frowned. There was a trace of suspicion on her face. Qin Feiyang sighed in his heart and asked with a smile, Miss Xiaohui, what are you thinking about? Gao Xiaohui glanced at Qin Feiyang and said indifferently, I am thinking that the name Qin Batian sounds familiar. Familiar? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He hurriedly grabbed Gao Xiaohui's hand and asked, Are you sure? Gao Xiaohui was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. She immediately shouted, What are you doing? Let go of me. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He quickly let go of Gao Xiaohui and smiled apologetically. Sorry. I was impulsive. Don't misunderstand. What's wrong with you? Why are you so surprised? Let me tell you, I am not that kind of woman. Don't even think about hitting on me. Gao Xiaohui looked at Qin Feiyang with disgust. It seemed that she had misunderstood Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was not in the mood to explain. He asked again, Miss Xiaohui, are you sure you have heard of the name Qin Batian? Gao Xiaohui looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and asked, Why? Do you know this Qin Batian? Fire Lotus saw this and sent a message to Qin Dage. Calm down, Qin Dage. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He cursed in his heart and almost lost his composure. He quickly composed himself and looked at Gao Xiaowei with a smile. This is the first time we have been born. How could we know Qin Batian? I just heard Guo Zixiong and the others talking about him. That's why I am curious about him. I see. Gao Xiaowei nodded and lowered her head to ponder. Qin Feiyang waited patiently. A moment later, Gao Xiaowei shook her head and said, I think I have heard this name before, but I can't remember where. Qin Feiyang controlled his temper and said with a smile, Take your time. Don't worry. Gao Xiaowei fell silent again. Fire Lotus looked at Gao Xiaowei and sent a message. Qin Dage, didn't Guo Zixiong say that no one here knew your ancestor? Why does Gao Xiaowei have an impression of him now? If Gao Xiaowei really knows about my ancestor, it means that Guo Zixiong is lying to me. Qin Feiyang thought. That's right. They even dared to forge a marriage contract. What else can they not do? But what is the Guo family planning? Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang also had an indescribable irritation in his heart. I remember now. Gao Xiaowei's eyes suddenly lit up. She looked at Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus and said, What did you remember? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. He tried to make his tone and expression calm. Gao Xiaowei said, This Qin Batian, I heard Big Brother mention him before. He seems to be a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace. What? Qin Feiyang froze. My ancestor was a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace? This was too ridiculous. How could the founder of the great Qin dynasty lower himself to become a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace? Absolutely impossible. Literature Center. Chapter 1934. Qin Dage, don't forget that this is the ancient world. Although your ancestor was a famous figure in the Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent, he's nothing here, as Guo Zixiong said. So it's not impossible for him to enter the Nine Heaven Palace. Fire Lotus saw through Qin Feiyang's thoughts and secretly said, That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded. After all, when his ancestor left, he was only a low-stage war god. Qin Feiyang looked at Gao Xiaowei and asked, Apart from the fact that Qin Batian is a disciple of the Nine Heaven Palace, do you know anything else? I'm not sure about that. Because I'm usually focused on cultivation, I don't know much about the outside world. Gao Xiaowei shook her head. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. It seemed that he had to make a trip to the Nine Heaven Palace to find out where his ancestor was. Wait. There was no way the Guo family would go through so much trouble to forge a marriage contract without any reason. Maybe Guo Zixiong and the old family head knew something? Whoosh. With this thought, Qin Feiyang looked at the image in the air again. After Guo Zixiong left, the old family head had already entered the pavilion. Fire Lotus said, Qin Dage, just kill this Gao Xiaowei so that she won't bring you trouble in the future. There's no rush. Let's deal with the Guo family first. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed with killing intent. He controlled the Black Tortoise realm and silently entered the pavilion. Soon he found the old family head. The old family head was sitting cross-legged on the bed in the bedroom on the second floor, closing his eyes and recuperating. What's going on? Gao Xiaowei looked at the old family head, then suspiciously looked at Qin Feiyang. Why did this person look like he wanted to harm the old family head? But wasn't this the first time this pair of brother and sister came out? Why did they have a grudge with the Guo family? No. This man and woman's identity definitely wasn't that simple. Thinking of this, Gao Xiaowei's eyes flashed. Who? Qin Feiyang stared at the old patriarch and took a deep breath. He then turned to Fire Lotus and said, Keep an eye on Gao Xiaowei. All right. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the image in the void disappeared. Then a blood-red sword light emerged from his palm. Gao Xiaowei's body began to tremble. What was that? How could it contain such a terrifying killing intent? Outside, the old clan leader's expression was serene. He did not notice that danger was approaching at all. Whoosh! Suddenly, a terrifying killing intent surged. The old patriarch was shocked and immediately opened his eyes. However, the moment he opened his eyes, he felt a sharp pain in his lower abdomen. He looked down and saw that there was a bloody hole in his lower abdomen. Immediately after. That heart-wrenching pain caused him to cry out in pain. At the same time, inside a large hall, Guo Zixiong and Guo De stood opposite each other. Guo Zixiong said, "Second uncle, I'm going to look for Qin Feiyang. Help me deal with the matters of the clan first." "Okay, be careful," Guo De reminded. Guo Zixiong nodded and opened an altar. However, at this moment, the two of them suddenly felt a terrifying killing intent, and the scream of the old patriarch. "What's going on?" The two of them were surprised. "Not good, it's father's voice." "Second uncle, quick!" Guo Zixiong exclaimed. The two of them immediately rushed out of the hall, and rushed towards the courtyard. One of them was a greater success war god, and the other was a lesser success war god. Naturally, their speed was extraordinary. In just 2 blinks of an eye, they reached the top of the attic and directly rushed into the old patriarch's bedroom from the balcony on the 2nd floor. However, there was no one in the bedroom. "Father?" Guo Zixiong called out anxiously. Guo De immediately released his divine sense to search the courtyard. His face gradually turned pale as he looked at Guo Zixiong and said, "I can't find any trace of your father." "Second uncle, Lord Father might have met with misfortune. Look." Guo Zixiong pointed at the bed. There was a pool of blood on it. How could this be? Guo De looked at the blood and his eyes trembled. "Quickly inform all the war gods and false gods in the clan to stop what they're doing and go look for father. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse." Guo Zixiong shouted. "Okay." Guo De nodded and hurriedly left. The realm of Black Tortoise. Deep in the desert. An old man with white hair stood in the yellow sand while holding his bleeding abdomen. It was the old patriarch. However, at this moment, he looked up at the sky, his eyes filled with shock and fear. In the sky, Qin Feiyang stood with his back, facing the old patriarch with his hands behind his back. There was an image in the sky in front of him. The image was showing the scene inside the attic. He silently looked at Guo Zixiong in the image. His eyes were filled with coldness. "Who are you? What conflict do I have with you? Why do you want to harm me?" Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't speak for a long time, the old patriarch shouted anxiously. Because Qin Feiyang's back was facing him, he didn't know that the person standing in front of him was Qin Feiyang. "Who am I?" Qin Feiyang murmured and said indifferently, "Haven't you been looking for me? Now that I'm standing in front of you, you still don't know who I am?" "Been looking for you? Are you crazy? Do I know you?" the old patriarch said angrily. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the image disappeared. Then he slowly turned around and faced the old patriarch. "You. This," the old patriarch's eyes immediately widened in disbelief. Qin Feiyang said, "It seems that Guo Zixiong has already told you my appearance." "You are Qin Feiyang." The old patriarch was shocked. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Why is he in my Guo family?" The old patriarch's eyes trembled and hurriedly said with a smile, "So you are Feiyang. You are indeed a dragon among men. But Feiyang, why are you doing this?" "Why?" Qin Feiyang raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "Don't you know very well in your heart? This is bad. Could it be that he heard my conversation with Guo Zixiong?" The old patriarch's eyelids twitched, but he pretended to be innocent and said suspiciously, "What do I know? What are you talking about? I don't understand." "You don't understand?" Qin Feiyang smiled. "Even now you're still playing dumb?" he said. "You spent a lot of effort to forge that marriage contract, right? Damn it." The old patriarch cursed secretly. Sure enough, he heard the conversation between him and Guo Zixiong. But what was the reason for this? For this plan, they were careful at every step. How could this kid notice the clues? Qin Feiyang said, "Now are you wondering why such a perfect plan was discovered by me?" The old patriarch nodded instinctively. "Because of the ancestor," Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. The old patriarch said in surprise, "You've seen Qin Batian?" "No. Even now, I still don't know whether the ancestor is alive or dead." Qin Feiyang said. The old patriarch said in surprise, "Then why do you say it's because of Qin Batian?" It's very simple. The ancestor is such a wise person. It's impossible for him to leave behind such a ridiculous marriage contract. Therefore, when I first saw the marriage contract, I was already suspicious. But that marriage contract, you forged it so perfectly that it could be passed off as the real thing, so I didn't dare to make a judgment at that time. So when I left the land of the dead, I found an excuse to leave in order to investigate the character of the Guo family. And the result was very disappointing. The Guo family bullied others with their power, and had a notorious record. The ancestor didn't like people like you at all, let alone a marriage alliance with you. So, I began to believe that the marriage contract was fake. Coincidentally, I also met Guo Sueki and rescued Gao Xiaohui from her hands. Then under Gao Xiaohui's lead, I sneaked into the Guo family. Speaking of which, this trip was really worth it. I just happened to hear your conversation with Guo Zixiong. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. I see. The old patriarch muttered. His heart was also incomparably shocked. It was really terrifying to have such a scheming mind at such a young age. Now I have a few questions. As long as you answer me truthfully, I can guarantee that you will have an intact corpse. Qin Feiyang said. The old patriarch collapsed on the ground powerlessly and said, I have nothing to say. If you want to kill me, just kill me. As expected, I still have to use the puppet technique. Qin Feiyang sighed. The old patriarch was stunned and asked in surprise, what is the puppet technique? A secret technique that can read other people's memories. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and formed a seal with both hands. The puppet imprint quickly appeared, and turned into a ray of light that shot into the old patriarch's head like lightning. However, it was also at this moment. The old patriarch smiled sinisterly and suddenly stood up. A wave of divine sense emerged and shattered the puppet imprint like a tide. Then it charged towards Qin Feiyang. Puff. The puppet imprint shattered. Qin Feiyang immediately spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was a little pale. However, looking at the divine sense, he wasn't nervous at all. He shook his head and smiled. I forgot that after breaking through to the war god realm, divine sense and soul can leave the sea of consciousness. So even if the sea of qi is destroyed, there is still a certain threat. It's too late to realize it now. Go to hell. The old patriarch laughed sinisterly. Za, you really won't cry until you enter the coffin. Qin Feiyang sighed and waved his hand. A blood-red light streaked across the sky and collided with the divine sense. Ah? The old patriarch immediately let out a miserable cry as his divine sense was completely shattered. How is this possible? His heart couldn't help but set off stormy waves. A mere low-level war god was actually able to easily obliterate his divine sense? Killing you is just a snap of a finger, so it's best to cooperate. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, and once again condensed the puppet imprint and rushed towards the old patriarch's head. Want to read this old man's memories? In your dreams. The old patriarch shouted. Divine sense once again emerged from the sea of consciousness, and the puppet imprint was shattered again. Qin Feiyang suffered a backlash again. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth and his brows were tightly knitted. It seems that the puppet technique wasn't very useful against a war god, especially against someone like the old patriarch whose cultivation was higher than his. If the other party kept resisting with divine sense, then the puppet technique wouldn't be able to control him at all. In other words, right now he could only control people whose cultivation was weaker than him. I didn't expect that after breaking through to the war god realm, the puppet technique would be worse than before. Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly. Literature Museum. Chapter 1935. Before reaching the war god realm, as long as his sea of qi was destroyed, he could control the other party no matter how high their cultivation was. Because at that time, his soul hadn't evolved into a divine soul. But now it was different. On one hand, he had to consider his cultivation. On the other hand, he had to consider his divine soul. In short, he couldn't use a divine art like the puppet art as easily as before. Even the seal of enslavement was the same, unless the other party was willing. Looks like I have to resort to some extreme measures. Qin Feiyang wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and looked at the old patriarch with a smile. The Gao family must have suffered a terrible fate. What do you want to do? The old patriarch's body trembled as he roared. Since the Gao family is gone, there's no need for the Guo family to exist. I might as well help Gao. Shall we take revenge for the extermination of her clan? Qin Feiyang faintly smiled. You, the old patriarch glared at Qin Feiyang and said, don't forget that you have something to do with the destruction of the Gao family. That's right. But I didn't kill anyone from the Gao family. Even in the land of the dead, I only destroyed the patriarch's cultivation. In the end, he died in the hands of Guo Zixiong. Plus, as long as the Guo family is gone, no one will know about it. Qin Feiyang smiled. You devil, aren't you afraid of being punished? The old patriarch roared. If you're not afraid, why should I be? Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. Fine. I'll tell you everything you want to know. Just let my family go. After all, we gave you a lot of soul stones. The old patriarch stared at Qin Feiyang coldly, but in the end he compromised. He had to compromise. He had seen Qin Feiyang's strength with his own eyes. If he really attacked, no one in the Guo family could stop him. Don't make it sound so righteous. If you didn't want to harm me, why would you give me soul stones? Even if I kneel on the ground and beg you, you won't give me a single soul stone. But then again, I really have to thank you. If it weren't for the soul stones you gave me, I wouldn't have been able to break through to War God so quickly. Now, I'm afraid I can only be at your mercy, Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Hearing this, the old patriarch was so angry that he vomited blood. His intestines were green with regret. If he had known this would happen, he would never have given this human soul stone to him. He sat weakly on the ground and said, Ask away. I asked you to answer before, but you didn't. Now I don't want to ask anymore. It's a waste of time. Qin Feiyang formed another seal, and the puppet imprint appeared once more. Stop resisting, or I'll really slaughter your Guo family. After saying that, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the puppet imprint pierced through the void and disappeared into the old patriarch's head. The old patriarch hesitated for a moment before finally giving up on resisting. Very soon, the puppet technique was completed. Qin Feiyang did not delay, and immediately began to read the old patriarch's memories. The old patriarch immediately held miserably like a pig being slaughtered. He felt as if his soul was being forcefully torn apart. Gradually, Qin Feiyang's face was filled with joy. Soon, that joyful expression turned into one of ecstasy. Haha. Finally, Qin Feiyang could not help but laugh and cry. At the same time, inside the ancient castle, Tantai Li and Qin Rishuang had already woken up from their seclusion. The mother and daughter stood together with a look of anticipation and nervousness. Suddenly, an invisible force enveloped them. The mother and daughter both appeared beside Qin Feiyang. Feiyang. The two of them looked at Qin Feiyang. They wanted to ask, but did not dare to. Qin Feiyang stopped laughing, looked at the mother and daughter with tears in his eyes, and said, Great-grandmother, the ancestor, he. What happened to him? Tantai Li hurriedly asked. He. Qin Feiyang's tone was choked, and there was a trace of grief on his face. Qin Rishuang urged, Feiyang, what happened? Hurry up and tell us. Ancestor. Qin Feiyang lowered his head, a trace of grief creeping onto his face. Could it be that father, he? Impossible. If father is dead, why did you laugh so loudly before? The mother and daughter looked at Qin Feiyang, their faces pale. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and said, I laughed because the ancestor was indeed in the ancient realm, but now. Hearing this, the mother and daughter immediately collapsed powerlessly. Their expressions were filled with grief. Haha. I'm teasing you. The ancestor is still alive now. Qin Feiyang laughed loudly. Alive. Their eyes trembled. Qin Feiyang squatted on the ground, grabbed their hands and said, This time I'm not teasing you. The ancestor is really still alive. You bastard. How can you joke about such an important matter? The mother and daughter looked at each other, and were immediately furious. They raised their fists and hammered Qin Feiyang's body like a storm. Qin Feiyang did not resist, and looked at the mother and daughter with a smile on his face. He was very happy that the ancestor was not dead, because the ancestor had always been his goal, and it could even be said that he worshipped and idolized him. However, the two women in front of him were definitely happier than him. On the side, the old patriarch looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two, his eyes constantly flickering. Suddenly, he got up and ran for his life without looking back. Seeing this, the mother and daughter finally calmed down and hurriedly reminded Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. Not to mention now, the old patriarch's cultivation was crippled. Even if his cultivation was still there, the entire Black Tortoise realm was his. Where could he run to? There was no need to care at all. The mother and daughter looked at each other and looked at the old patriarch's back, and could not help but sympathize. Qin Rishuang asked, Feiyang, where is father now? How long will it take to find him? On the contrary, Qin Feiyang became hesitant. What's wrong? Are you trying to scare us again? I'm telling you, if you do this again, I won't let you off easily. Tantai raised her eyebrows. No. Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hand and sighed. To tell you the truth, the old patriarch doesn't know much. What do you mean? The mother and daughter became nervous again. Don't be so nervous. Back then, the ancestor never returned after leaving the Guo family. Therefore, Guo Zixiong and the old patriarch only know some rumors about the ancestor. Qin Feiyang said. What rumors? Tantai asked. It is said that the ancestor entered the Empyrean Palace back then, and made a name for himself. It can be said that during that period, no one did not know the ancestor's name. Qin Feiyang said. Since he is so famous, why did that child named Gao shall we only remember him after thinking for a long time? And he knows so little. Tantai was puzzled. This is because as early as 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, our ancestor had already disappeared without a trace. There are rumors that the ancestor is in seclusion. There are also rumors that the ancestor became a core figure of the Empyrean Palace, and did not appear in the world. There are even rumors that the ancestor went to travel the continent. Think about it, the ancestor disappeared 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. Gao Xiaohui was not even born at that time, so how could she know? Not to mention Gao Xiaohui. According to the memories of the old patriarch of the Guo family, there are not many people in the northern region who still know about the ancestor. Qin Feiyang said. Disappear without a trace? The mother and daughter looked at each other. Qin Rishuang said. Then the clues are broken again? Moreover, how can a person disappear unless he is dead? You have to believe in the ancestor. With his ability, it is absolutely impossible for him to die. As for the clues, they will not be broken. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. What do you mean? Qin Rishuang was suspicious. Others may not know the whereabouts of the ancestor, but the upper echelons of the Empyrean Palace will definitely know. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. Since father has stayed in the Empyrean Palace, then the people of the Empyrean Palace will definitely know his whereabouts. Feiyang, let's go to the Empyrean Palace immediately. Qin Rishuang urged. Look at how anxious you are. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and sighed. The Empyrean Palace is not a place that everyone can enter. Qin Rishuang and Tantai looked at each other and looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously. Let me explain it to you like this. The Empyrean Palace's position in the northern region is equivalent to the imperial capital of the Great Qin Empire, and the Great Tower of the Forgotten Continent. One must go through layers of tests before one can enter, and those who can enter the Empyrean Palace are basically the favored ones of the heavens. Therefore, this matter cannot be rushed. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Hearing this, Tantai looked at Qin Rishuang and smiled bitterly. It seems that there is still a long way to go before we can find and reunite with your father. Qin Rishuang clenched her fists and said firmly, no matter how difficult it is, I must find him. Tantai rubbed Qin Rishuang's head and felt sorry for her. Then she looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, why did the Guo family forge the marriage contract? Because of ambition. The Guo family is not willing to continue struggling at the bottom of the ancient world, so they want to use me to establish a relationship with the ancestor. because with the ancestor's position in the Empyrean Palace, as long as I marry Gwasweki, it will be equivalent to having the Empyrean Palace as a backer. Even if the ancestor is not in the Empyrean Palace now, with the ancestor's prestige, the Gua family can still reap many benefits. The most important thing is the purple gold dragon blood. Qin Feiyang said. Purple gold dragon blood? The mother and daughter frowned. Yes. The purple gold dragon blood flowing in the ancestor's body is no longer a secret in the northern region. There are even rumors that the reason the ancestor has such heaven-defying talent and can rise in such a short time is entirely because of the purple gold dragon blood. Therefore, the Gua family wants me to marry Gwasweki and give birth to a few descendants with the purple gold dragon blood. In this way, the Gua family can still rise even without the ancestors and my help. Qin Feiyang said. Haha. So that's how it is. The Gua family is really scheming. They are completely using you as a tool to give birth to children. Qin Rishwang covered her mouth and laughed. Qin Feiyang's face was full of helplessness. Tantaili said, Does Gwasweki know about this? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. She can't even control her own marriage. She doesn't even know anything. What a pitiful child. Tantaili shook her head and sighed. After pondering for a while, she said, By the way, how is the relationship between your ancestor and the Gua family? Literature Museum. Chapter 1936. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and frowned. I can't explain their relationship. Didn't you read the old patriarch's memory? Why can't you explain it clearly? The mother and daughter were puzzled. Qin Feiyang said, Back then, our ancestor stayed with the Gua family for a while, and then left without saying goodbye. The Gua family members don't know what he was thinking. Left without saying goodbye? Tantaili frowned. Mother, did you think of something? Qin Rishwang asked. Tantaili said, Your father has a good character. If there wasn't a special reason, he wouldn't have left without saying goodbye. Qin Rishwang said, Then what do you think the special reason is? I think he might have found out about the Gua family's character, but didn't want to reveal it, so he left without saying a word. Tantaili said. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up and he said with a smile, Great-grandmother, what you said makes sense. Tantaili waved her hand and said with a smile, I'm just guessing and don't take it seriously. However, Gua Zixiong's family has a good plan. Mother, why are you still praising them? Qin Rishwang was a little dissatisfied. Of course, I have to praise them. You dare to scheme against Feiyang? How audacious. Tantaili chuckled. Qin Feiyang and Qin Rishwang looked at each other. Why did Tantaili's tone sound a little off? Tantaili looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile and asked, Feiyang, what do you think we should do? It seems that great-grandmother is angry. Qin Feiyang muttered to himself, but he was very touched. Great-grandmother was angry because the Gua family had schemed against him. In other words, she was fighting for him. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and shook his head. To tell you the truth, great-grandmother, I've thought about this seriously. I originally wanted to destroy the Gua family directly, but now, I don't want to do it. You don't want to do it? Tantaili raised her eyebrows. This wasn't the kid's personality at all. I think so. The Gao family was exterminated because of me. I have to do something to make it up to them. Qin Feiyang smiled. I see. You want Gao Shaohui to deal with the Gua clan. Tantaili suddenly understood. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said, No, Gao Shaohui alone is not enough. Who else? Tantaili asked. Gao Xiaolong. According to Gao Shaohui, this person broke through to the advanced stage of the battle god realm last year. As long as the old patriarch, a perfect battle god, dies, I believe that with his identity as a disciple of the Nine Heaven Palace, it will be easy for him to destroy the Gua family. Qin Feiyang smiled. Qin Rishwang frowned. Feiyang, why do I feel like you're using someone else to do your dirty work? Go. How can you call this killing with a borrowed knife? I'm just being nice. Qin Feiyang said unhappily. I can't tell. Qin Rishwang pursed her lips. Tantaili smiled. Rishwang, you don't understand. Feiyang is doing this to prepare for entering the Nine-Heaven Palace. What do you mean? Qin Rishuang was suspicious. Think about it. We are strangers in the ancient world, who will help us enter the Nine-Heaven Palace. But it's different with Gao Xiaolong. Gao Xiaolong is a disciple of the Nine-Heaven Palace. He must have some connections in the Nine-Heaven Palace. With his help, wouldn't it be easier to enter the Nine-Heaven Palace? Tantai Li smiled. So that's how it is. Qin Rishuang suddenly understood. She looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. In other words, you're trying to curry favor with others? Can you not make it sound so bad? This is not a waste of resources. Qin Feiyang was speechless. Yes. What you said makes sense. Qin Rishuang rolled her eyes and frowned. But I'm thinking, is this necessary? Father has such a high status in the Nine-Heaven Palace. As long as we show our identity, won't the people of the Nine-Heaven Palace come to welcome us? You're thinking too simply. As the saying goes, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Our ancestor was so talented that he must have aroused the jealousy of many people. Moreover, we don't know what's going on with our ancestor. So at this time, if we reveal our identity in advance, it might backfire. Qin Feiyang said. Rishuang, do you see? This is the brain. Every time you do something, you have to consider all aspects. Otherwise, one wrong step will result in your death. Tantai Li said. Qin Rishuang pouted and said unhappily, Mother, continue to praise him. Be careful not to praise him to the heavens. All right. Feiyang, do as you see fit. Send us to the castle. Tantai Li smiled. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded. With a wave of his hand, the two disappeared. Then, he released his perception and a cold smile crept up the corner of his mouth. Somewhere in the desert. As the old patriarch ran for his life, he looked around in bewilderment. What the hell is this place? Other than the sandstorm, there was nothing. Are you tired? If you're tired, take a rest. Suddenly, a teasing voice sounded. The old patriarch's gaze trembled. He looked up and saw Qin Feiyang standing in the air with a playful look in his eyes. Don't kill me, okay? The old patriarch knelt on the ground powerlessly, his face full of despair. Qin Feiyang crossed his arms in front of his chest, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, he waved his hand and smiled. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Really? The old patriarch was surprised and happy. Of course. Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand. The power of rule force descended from the sky, forming a barrier and trapping the old patriarch inside. What kind of power is this? The old patriarch glanced at the barrier in surprise. Just stay here. When I need you, I'll come and find you. After saying so, Qin Feiyang flashed and disappeared. The old patriarch retracted his gaze, reached out his hand, and carefully touched the barrier. Immediately, a pressure from the soul rushed to his mind. He quickly retracted his arm, his face full of fear. I forgot one thing. At this time, Qin Feiyang appeared again, and glanced at the old patriarch's index finger. There was a black ring on his index finger. Qiankuan ring. Shua. Qin Feiyang stepped on the barrier and smiled. Give me your Qiankuan ring and your divine artifact. The old patriarch looked at the Qiankuan ring and hesitated, his face full of reluctance. He didn't care much about the Qiankuan ring. What he cared about was the treasures in the Qiankuan ring. Hurry up. Qin Feiyang shouted. Yes. The old patriarch nodded, took off the Qiankuan ring and handed it to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed it in his hand and said, There's also a divine artifact. The old patriarch hurriedly said, I have a divine artifact, but it's not with me now. Then who has it? Qin Feiyang frowned. The old patriarch didn't dare to say. Qin Feiyang looked at the old patriarch, his eyes flashing slightly and said, Your divine artifact should be the fire dragon divine sword. No, the old patriarch shook his head. His divine artifact was actually the fire dragon divine sword. The reason why he denied it was because he was afraid that Qin Feiyang would find trouble with Guosweki. Fire dragon divine sword, high-grade divine artifact. To be honest, I don't like it. Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully, took out a spirit sea pill, threw it to the old patriarch, and disappeared without a trace. The old patriarch was stunned. Why did he give him the spirit sea pill? Wasn't he afraid that his Qi Sea would recover and break the barrier and escape? The land of the demons. The herb field. Fire Lotus and Gao Xiaowei sat in the courtyard of the herb field, chatting and laughing, and got along very well. Gao Xiaowei looked outside the courtyard, at the swaying herbs, and said in surprise, "Fire Lotus sister, such a big herb field, is it all yours?" "Yes." Fire Lotus nodded. Gao Xiaowei said, "Then where is this place? And why are you wearing a mask?" "This place." Fire Lotus looked around and said with a smile, "A very magical place. As for the mask, it's because I'm too smelly, and I don't want to scare people." Gao Xiaowei was stunned and said helplessly, "Fire Lotus sister, you didn't say anything. What are you talking about? You look so happy." Qin Feiyang appeared in the courtyard and looked at the two with a smile. Gao Xiaowei immediately stood up and stared at Qin Feiyang, a trace of vigilance creeping up her face. "I say, Miss Xiaowei, this is your fault. Am I that scary? Staring at me like this the moment you arrived? Besides, don't forget that I'm your savior." Qin Feiyang was displeased. "Who knows if you have an ulterior motive for saving me?" Gao Xiaowei harumphed coldly. Qin Feiyang's face was full of helplessness. Fire Lotus shook her head and smiled. She walked to Qin Feiyang's side and asked, "Brother, is everything settled?" "Brother?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. Why did she call him so affectionately? "Didn't you say to Gao Xiaowei that we're brother and sister?" Then, in front of her, "Of course I have to call you brother." Fire Lotus transmitted her voice. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Then he laughed involuntarily and nodded. "Everything is settled. Then what's next?" Fire Lotus asked. "Next?" Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment, then looked at Gao Xiaowei. "Your brother Gao Xiaolong is in the Nine Heavens Palace, right?" "Yes." Gao Xiaowei nodded. Qin Feiyang said, "Good, I'll send you to the Nine Heavens Palace now." "You're sending me to the Nine Heavens Palace?" Gao Xiaowei was stunned, then she waved her hand. "Thank you for your kindness, but there's no need. I can go by myself. You really don't need to guard against me like this. On the contrary, the one you should be worried about is your brother," Qin Feiyang said. Gao Xiaowei sneered. "My brother is a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace. Why should I be worried about him?" "I say you're stupid. You're really stupid. Didn't you hear the conversation between the old patriarch and Guozixiong? At that time, Guozixiong mentioned your brother, saying that your brother is a threat. Does that mean he wants to get rid of your brother? But the old patriarch told Guozixiong not to worry, saying he has his own plans. What do you think the old patriarch's plans are?" Qin Feiyang teased. This, Gao Xiaowei was dumbfounded. Qin Feiyang said, "Let me tell you, there is only one plan, and that is to spend money to buy your brother's life. Now tell me, should I be worried about your brother?" Yes, yes, yes. Gao Xiaowei nodded repeatedly, then looked at Qin Feiyang in a daze asking, "Then what should I do now?" Literature Museum. Chapter 1937. Is there a need to ask? Contact your elder brother immediately, Qin Feiyang said. Yes, yes, yes. Gao Xiaowei nodded, but her face suddenly stiffened. She looked at Qin Feiyang and said bitterly, "My Qianquan bag and image crystal were destroyed by the Guo family. I can't contact my elder brother." Qin Feiyang frowned. When he was at the volcano, he seemed to have heard Guo Sueki and the black-clothed man say that Gao Xiaowei and Gao Guofeng's Qianquan bags and Qianquan rings were destroyed. This was a bit difficult. Qin Feiyang asked, "Is there no one else who can contact your elder brother?" "No. Those who can contact my elder brother have been killed." Gao Xiaowei shook her head. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said, "It seems that we can only go to the Ninth Heaven Palace first and find a way to find your elder brother." "Then let's go quickly," Gao Xiaowei urged. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly and said, "Before we set off, I still need to do something." "What is it?" Gao Xiaowei was suspicious. "It has nothing to do with you." Qin Feiyang glanced at her indifferently. With a wave of his hand, an image appeared in the void. In the image, Guo Zixiong stood in front of the bed, looking at the bloodstains on the bed with a gloomy face. Swish. Suddenly, a woman in red appeared next to Guo Zixiong out of thin air. Looking at this woman, Gao Xiaohui's eyes flashed with hatred. Because this woman was Guo Sueki. Father, what's going on? As soon as Guo Sueki appeared, she saw the bloodstains on the bed and asked Guo Zixiong. I don't know either. Just now, I was going to look for Qin Feiyang, but suddenly I heard your grandfather's scream. When your second uncle and I rushed here, there was nothing but these bloodstains. Guo Zixiong shook his head. What about grandfather? Guo Sueki's face turned pale and asked. He's also missing. Guo Zixiong clenched his hands and shouted. Damn bastard, who is it? Come out. Missing. Could it be the same person who saved Gao Xiaohui? If that's really the case, then what is his motive for saving Gao Xiaohui and now kidnapping Grandpa? Guo Sueki muttered. Not good. Suddenly, Guo Zixiong exclaimed and immediately turned to run downstairs. Guo Sueki was stunned for a moment before she hurriedly followed him. Qin Feiyang also controlled the Black Tortoise realm and quietly flew down. When he arrived at the hall on the first floor, Guo Zixiong glanced around and walked straight to a vase. Then he gently turned the vase. Crack! The ground in the corner of the hall slowly split open, revealing a dark passage. Following closely, Guo Zixiong and his daughter entered the passage. Brother, where does it lead to? Fire Lotus asked suspiciously. The Guo family's treasure vault. The corners of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted slightly. He controlled the Black Tortoise realm and flew in. So this is what you want to do? Fire Lotus suddenly smiled. Gao Xiaohui couldn't help but size up Qin Feiyang and his daughter. She asked suspiciously. What grudge do you have with the Guo family? You won't even let go of the treasure vault. Qin Feiyang laughed. We just came out of seclusion. What grudge could we have with the Guo family? We are helping you vent your anger. Gao Xiaohui was stunned. They were not related to her. Helping her vent her anger? That's bullshit. The secret passage was not long. Soon they saw a stone door in front of them. The stone door was tightly shut and emitted a strong aura. Guo Zixiong ran to the stone door and pressed down on a stone brick beside the stone door. The stone door immediately opened. A secret room about 100 feet wide appeared in front of them. Inside the secret room, there were rows of iron shelves neatly placed on top of which were thousands of Qiankuan bags. So many Qiankuan bags, how many treasures are there? Fire Lotus was dumbfounded. Apart from the Qiankuan bags, there were also some knives, spears, sticks, jade boxes and iron boxes. Gao Xiaohui snorted. How can the Guo family have so many treasures? Half of the treasures here belong to the Gao family. You are from the Gao family? Fire Lotus was stunned. Qin Feiyang laughed. Fire Lotus, think about it. After the Guo family gets rid of the Gao family, will they let go of the Gao family's treasure vault? Fire Lotus was slightly taken aback and laughed. Looks like we are quite lucky to get the treasures of two families. Qin Feiyang was also full of smiles. There must be a lot of soul stones and divine crystals here. Wait. Didn't you say you would help me vent my anger? But why does it sound like you want to take all the treasures here? Gao Xiaohui hurriedly said. Qin Feiyang said. Since we are here, we must take them all. No. If you are helping me vent my anger, then you should return the treasures to the Gao family. Gao Xiaohui said. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus were stunned. Return? Was this woman really that naive? How could she think like that? Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Miss Xiaohui, don't think too much. The things here have nothing to do with you. Gao Xiaohui glared at Qin Feiyang. This bastard was a bandit. In the secret chamber, Guo Zixiong checked around and finally let out a long breath. He looked at Guo Sueki and smiled. Fortunately, nothing is missing. Let's go out and find your grandfather. Okay. Guo Sueki nodded. The father and daughter turned and walked out of the treasure vault. After closing the stone door, they left directly, unaware that the person they were looking for was in the treasure vault. The treasure vault. Qin Feiyang was standing in front of an iron shelf, holding a Qiankuan bag and looking down. Fire Lotus was also holding a jade box in her hand, looking curiously at the things inside. Gao Xiaohui looked around, her eyes darting around. Suddenly, her eyes were fixed on a row of iron shelves behind her. On the third level of the iron shelf, there was a black iron box, about the size of a palm, rusty and inconspicuous. But looking at the iron box, Gao Xiaohui's eyes lit up. She glanced at Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. Seeing that both of them had lowered their heads, she pretended to be indifferent and walked to the iron shelf, reaching out to grab the iron box and quietly put it in her arms. "What are you doing?" But just when she thought that no one would notice, Qin Feiyang's suspicious voice sounded behind her. Gao Xiaohui's body stiffened. She slowly turned her head around and saw that Qin Feiyang was already standing behind her. At that moment, he was looking at her with a pair of ridiculing eyes. "I didn't do anything?" Although Gao Xiaohui tried hard to remain calm, there was still a hint of panic in her expression. "Nothing. But why do I see that you seem to be holding an iron box?" Qin Feiyang said teasingly. When Gao Xiaohui heard this, she subconsciously covered her chest. Wasn't this equivalent to confessing without being pressed? But when Gao Xiaohui realized this, it was already too late. Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "It's not good to be a thief, hand it over." "Do you have any shame? You're obviously a thief, and you still have the cheek to say that to me. Besides, there are so many treasures here. What's wrong with me only taking an iron box?" Gao Xiaohui's almond-shaped eyes widened in anger. She was about to go crazy from anger. "Since there are so many treasures, why didn't you take anything else but that inconspicuous iron box? And you didn't even look at it before putting it in your arms. What does this mean?" "It means that you know this iron box and know what's inside? In other words, this iron box is from the Gao family." Qin Feiyang's teasing expression became even more obvious. Facing Qin Feiyang's gaze, Gao Xiaohui could no longer hide the panic in her heart. Who exactly is this man? How could she have seen through so much with just these insignificant actions? "Don't test my patience. Even the old patriarch is no match for me, not to mention you." "Hurry up," Qin Feiyang said with a smile. "Big brother, I beg you, just give me this iron box. Is there really nothing in this iron box?" Gao Xiaohui looked at Qin Feiyang pleadingly with a pitiful look. If the hard way didn't work, then he would use the soft way. Chapter 1938. Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. He just looked at her with a smile. She wouldn't budge. Seeing this, Gao Xiaohui decided to act shamelessly. She stuck out her chest, raised her back, and glared at Qin Feiyang. "Search me if you dare." "Hey, do you think I don't dare?" After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he grabbed Gao Xiaohui's arm with one hand. His other hand reached into Miss Gao's bosom with lightning speed, and took away the metal box. Gao Xiaohui was dumbfounded. Then, her cheeks turned red. "Bastard hooligan. How dare you ruin my innocence, you scoundrel. I'll kill you." However, just as Gao Xiaohui pounced towards Qin Feiyang with bared fangs and brandished claws, Huolian stepped in front of Qin Feiyang. With bone-chilling coldness in her eyes, she coldly said, "Miss Gao Xiaohui, don't push your luck." Looking at Fire Lotus's eyes, Gao Xiaohui couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. She felt as if she was facing the god of death. This was completely different from the Fire Lotus she had seen before. Huolian had always been very kind and gentle, which made Gao Xiaohui think that Huolian was a docile and obedient girl. So when she suddenly saw the other side of Fire Lotus, she couldn't accept it for a while. As for Qin Feiyang, he simply ignored Gao Xiaohui and directly opened the metal box. Inside, there was a green ring that looked like it was carved out of a piece of jade. It was bright and shone with divine light. Qin Feiyang took out the ring and looked at it curiously. He found that it was an interspatial ring. An interspatial ring could only be opened and used after it was owned by a drop of blood. Qin Feiyang glanced at Miss Gao and entered the Black Tortoise realm alone. He cut his finger, and a drop of purple gold dragon blood fell on it. Immediately, the interspatial ring emitted wisps of blurry purple gold light. He had to keep the fact that he had the purple gold dragon blood a secret for now. After Qin Feiyang recognized him as the owner, he immediately checked the Cosmos ring. When he saw the things inside the cosmos ring, a trace of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. The interspatial ring was filled with soul stones. He estimated that there were at least 3,000 to 4,000 of them. No wonder Gao Xiaowei wanted the metal box so badly. It turned out that there were so many soul stones hidden inside. Whoosh! After Qin Feiyang sent the soul stone to the castle, he took a look at the old patriarch's interspatial ring. Aside from some pills, there were also a few hundred soul stones. There were more than 2,000 divine gems. Qin Feiyang also sent them to the castle. He would count them when he had time. Subsequently, with the emerald interspatial ring in his hand, he reappeared in the treasury. As soon as Qin Feiyang appeared, Gao Xiaowei stared at the interspatial ring in his hand. Fire Lotus asked suspiciously, "Brother, what's inside?" 3,000 to 4,000 soul stones. Qin Feiyang smiled. "So that's how it is," Huo Lian said with a smile. Qin Feiyang said, "Let's see if there are any other soul stones." "Okay." Fire Lotus nodded. The two of them immediately got busy. They checked while sweeping through the items. Of course, they only checked briefly. After all, there were so many interspatial bags and boxes. If they counted them one by one, they didn't know how long it would take. Gao Xiaowei, on the other hand, could only watch angrily the whole time. In the end, the entire treasury was swept clean by Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. Most of the items in the interspatial bags were herbs. The jade box and the metal box were mostly battle arts and divine arts. And the sabers, spears, sticks were also divine artifacts. However, there weren't many divine arts or divine artifacts in them. Of course, they wouldn't know the details until they counted them. They also found a lot of divine gems, at least 100,000. But they didn't find a single soul stone. In other words, there were only 3,000 to 4,000 soul stones in the entire treasury. Miss Xiaowei, there are thousands of villages under your Gao family and Guo family's rule. They give you offerings every year. This number is not small. But why are there only so few soul stones you have accumulated over the years? Qin Feiyang walked to Gao Xiaowei and frowned. What do you know? Both of our families have dozens of war gods and hundreds of false gods. Each of them needs soul stones. The soul stones handed over by those villages aren't enough for us, so it's not easy to accumulate 2,000 to 3,000, 3,000 to 4,000. Gao Xiaowei snorted. That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded, thought for a moment, and said, "Then this time, why did you two families want to fight?" The Guo family provoked the battle. According to our investigation, it seems that the Guo family gave the soul stones to someone and didn't have any savings, so they wanted to challenge our Gao family. The loser will hand over all their savings and territory, Gao Xiaowei said. I see. Qin Feiyang was enlightened. Fire Lotus snickered. Qin Dage, so you're the fuse of this battle. Me. Qin Feiyang was dazed. Yes. Didn't you hear what Gao Xiaowei said? The Guo family challenged the Gao family, because they gave the soul stones to someone? Fire Lotus thought. Qin Feiyang was shocked, then he couldn't help but smile wryly. Thinking about it, it did seem to be the case. The Guo family gave the soul stones to him, so they must be looking for soul stones, so they targeted the Gao family. Fire Lotus smiled and said, "You don't have to blame yourself because the Guo family and the Gao family are the same." That makes sense. Qin Feiyang smiled and glanced at the treasury again. Seeing that there was nothing left, he threw the yin and yang ring to Fire Lotus. What are you? Fire Lotus caught the yin and yang ring with a shocked expression. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "You've been running all over the place with me. No matter what, I have to give you some compensation." Compensate? Fire Lotus was stunned, then she teased. Aren't you afraid that your sister-in-law will be jealous? Jealous? How is that possible? Your sister-in-law is knowledgeable, gentle, and considerate. Qin Feiyang smiled and took the two back to the Black Tortoise Realm. Then he used the Black Tortoise Realm to break through the secret chamber, rushed out of the underground, and flew into the sky. The attic also shattered with the sound. Fire Lotus gladly accepted the gift. However, Gao Xiaowei, who was standing at the side, was extremely displeased, because the yin and yang ring belonged to the Gao family. After Qin Feiyang left with the Black Tortoise Realm, Guo Zixiong and Guo Sueki both landed in the sky above the courtyard. Looking at the destroyed pavilion and the large hole in the ground, his entire body emitted a monstrous murderous aura. Then, the two of them entered the treasure vault through the hole. Looking at the empty treasure vault, the anger in their hearts instantly exploded. The treasury had actually been ransacked. Sueki, give the order immediately. No matter who they are, no matter where they are, find them and make them pay. Guo Zixiong roared. Yes. Guo Sueki nodded, glanced at the treasury, and left with a gloomy face. P.S. Late update, late blessing. I wish everyone a happy Lantern Festival. By the way, there are 3 chapters tomorrow. Chapter 1939. As the culprit, Qin Feiyang didn't even think about Guo family's revenge. Naturally, he wasn't afraid of Guo family's revenge. At this time, while driving the Black Tortoise world at lightning speed, he was playing with an interspatial ring. This wasn't the interspatial ring he gave Fire Lotus, but the one he snatched from the old patriarch. Interspatial bags and interspatial rings really couldn't be compared. No matter how big the interspatial bag was, there was still a limit. But the space inside this interspatial ring was several li wide. Who knew how many things it could hold? Even those who didn't know would think that it was a spatial divine item. After playing with it for a while, Qin Feiyang put it on his finger. Needless to say, the size was quite suitable. Bandit hooligan. Gao Xiaowei had been eyeing Qin Feiyang from the side, but she couldn't do anything to Qin Feiyang. Fire Lotus also wore an interspatial ring and asked, Brother, do you know the location of the 9 Heavens Palace? Yes. It's in the old patriarch's memories. Qin Feiyang nodded. How far is it? Fire Lotus asked. Quite far. At our current speed, it'll take at least a few years. We can't even teleport an altar there. Qin Feiyang said. So far? Fire Lotus raised her eyebrows. Yes. This northern domain is really big. Qin Feiyang smiled and led the two out of the Black Tortoise world, immediately activating an altar. Although he didn't have a teleportation altar, the old patriarch's interspatial ring had more than a dozen altars. The 3 stepped onto the altar and descended in the air above a mountain. Following closely, Qin Feiyang took out another altar. Although a teleportation altar couldn't directly reach the 9 Heavens Palace, it could be used continuously. This was the same route the old patriarch used to go to the 9 Heavens Palace. Brother, you've read the old patriarch's memories. You should know how he's going to deal with Gao Xiaolong, right? Fire Lotus suddenly asked. When Gao Xiaowei heard this, she immediately looked at Qin Feiyang nervously. Qin Feiyang glanced at Gao Xiaowei and shook his head. I don't know. Don't know? Fire Lotus was stunned. She looked at the smile on Qin Feiyang's face, then glanced at Gao Xiaowei, and immediately understood. She was deliberately toying with Gao Xiaowei. As expected, after hearing Qin Feiyang's reply, Gao Xiaowei immediately frowned and said, How can you not know after reading the old patriarch's memories? Perhaps I was careless and didn't retrieve any memories related to this. Qin Feiyang said seriously. How could you be so careless? Gao Xiaowei said angrily. She even believed Qin Feiyang's nonsense. This has nothing to do with me. Why should I care so much? Qin Feiyang looked at her indifferently, then stepped onto the altar. Fire Lotus held back her laughter and followed behind Qin Feiyang. Gao Xiaowei chased after them and said angrily, How can you be like this? Haven't you heard of the saying, when you help someone, help them to the end? Accompanied by Gao Xiaowei's angry voice, the 3 of them appeared in the air above a desert. In the desert, a sandstorm filled the sky. One after another, terrifying auras made one's hair stand. Obviously, in this desert, there were many terrifying fierce beasts hiding. However, Qin Feiyang didn't stop. Activating another altar, he left the desert and appeared in the air above an ice field. The cold wind was biting cold, bone-piercing. Not there yet, Fire Lotus asked. Soon. Qin Feiyang took out another altar. Throughout the entire process, Qin Feiyang activated a total of 10 altars. Finally, a vast mountain range entered their line of sight. In the mountain range, There were overlapping mountains and old trees with roots. And at the end of the mountain range, there was a vast sea that stretched as far as the eye could see. In the mountains, the torrential rivers were connected to the sea. Ferocious birds and ferocious beasts soared and roared in the forest. Here, there were green mountains and clear waters. Waterfalls could be seen everywhere. The environment was quite good. However, danger lurked everywhere. Because the fierce beasts here were generally at the war god and monarch level. Qin Feiyang even felt an existence that surpassed the monarch level. And at the peak of the tallest mountain in the mountain range. That giant mountain was more than 10,000 zhang tall. The peak of the mountain was covered in white fog. In the fog, an ancient stairway to heaven could be vaguely seen. Qin Feiyang looked up at the peak of the mountain and said, "The 9 Heaven Palace that the old patriarch knew ended here." Fire Lotus said, "You mean the old patriarch only came here?" "That's right. According to his memories, the stairway to heaven at the peak of the mountain leads to the 9 Heaven Palace. Although the entrance is right in front of you, other than the disciples of the 9 Heaven Palace, everyone can only stop here. Whoever dares to trespass will be killed without mercy." Qin Feiyang said. "Then what should we do?" Gao Xiaohui looked helplessly at Qin Feiyang. If they couldn't enter the 9 Heaven Palace, they wouldn't be able to contact her big brother, Gao Xiaolong. Qin Feiyang said, "Wait for me here, I'll go up and take a look." "Then you have to be careful," Fire Lotus warned. Qin Feiyang nodded and soared into the sky, flying towards the mountain peak. At the same time he took off his universe ring and put it in his clothes. He also took out a set of shabby clothes from his universe bag and put them on, pretending to be a country boy who had never seen the world. This way, if the people of the 9 Heaven Palace asked, he could pretend not to know. The mountain peak. It was as if a giant axe had flattened it, and it was paved with a layer of black stone bricks that had been there for a long time. The stairway to heaven was located in the middle of the mountain peak, slanting upwards, extending into the clouds. Qin Feiyang landed on the mountain peak, and immediately saw an old man in white sitting cross-legged beside the stairway to heaven, motionless like a stone statue. The old man had white hair and a white beard, and his face was wrinkled. His eyes were closed, and no aura could be sensed from him, as if he was just an ordinary old man. But Qin Feiyang didn't dare to underestimate him, because it didn't take a genius to figure out that this old man was sitting cross-legged here to guard the stairway to heaven. In other words, he was the gatekeeper of the 9 Heaven Palace. How could the gatekeeper of the 9 Heavens Palace be a simple character? Qin Feiyang was on high alert as he raised his head to look at the stairway to heaven. The stairway to heaven was more than 10 meters wide. It was pure white as if it was made of divine jade, exuding a sacred and ancient aura. At the end of the stairway to heaven, above the clouds, a huge island could be vaguely seen. Although he was unable to see it clearly, the majestic aura that was imperceptibly emitted had already given Qin Feiyang a feeling of impact and shock. "This is the 9 Heaven Palace. Unrelated people leave at once." Suddenly, a hoarse voice broke the silence in this place. The tone was calm and indifferent, without any ripples. Qin Feiyang quivered and hurriedly looked at the old man in white, because the one who spoke was this old man, but he didn't open his eyes and his expression didn't change. "Greetings, senior." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said. The old man in white didn't speak again, nor did he open his eyes to look at Qin Feiyang, as if Qin Feiyang was air. Qin Feiyang said, "Senior, Junior is here to see someone. I hope Senior can accommodate me." The old man in white said indifferently, "Use the image crystal to contact him." He still didn't open his eyes. Although his words were very calm, there was a kind of majesty that couldn't be disobeyed. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "Senior, the person Junior is looking for has not established a contract with Junior, so I hope Senior. Let's go." But before Qin Feiyang finished, the old man in white opened his mouth. His tone began to have a trace of coldness. Qin Feiyang sighed helplessly, turned into a stream of light, cut through the sky, and landed beside Fire Lotus and Gao Xiaohui. "How is it?" Gao Xiaohui hurriedly asked. "There's no chance at all." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "What should we do?" Gao Xiaohui was burning with anxiety. It's definitely impossible to enter the Nine Heaven Palace. We can only try our luck nearby, and see if we can meet someone who knows your big brother. Qin Feiyang pondered. Then let's go quickly, Gao Xiaohui urged. What's the hurry? There are beasts everywhere here. If we run around like headless flies, we will definitely encounter a lot of trouble. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he released his divine sense in all directions. Everything was clear in his eyes. He saw beasts as big as mountains, pythons as big as mountains, and poisonous insects as small as grains of rice, but he didn't see any traces of humans. Something wasn't right. The beasts here were too terrifying. Ordinary disciples wouldn't come here to hunt, train, or search for treasures. Qin Feiyang turned around and looked at the periphery of the mountain range. Perhaps there were disciples of the Nine Heaven Palace in the periphery or the border. He made a prompt decision. He brought Fire Lotus and Gao Xiaohui into the Black Tortoise world, then controlled the Black Tortoise world and flew towards the periphery. This mountain range was unimaginably huge. The number of beasts was also beyond imagination. If they didn't directly teleport in with their strength, they wouldn't be able to reach the Nine Heaven Palace. Time flew by and a day passed. The beasts they encountered finally had a change in strength. Monarch God-level beasts were nowhere to be seen. Their cultivation was generally at the war god level. In other words, they had already left the hinterland. Morning. The sun rose from the horizon. The cold air left by the night gradually dissipated. Roar. Boom. After that, the roars of beasts and the sounds of battle gradually came from the mountains in front. If there were sounds of battle, there must be people. Qin Feiyang immediately followed one of the sounds of battle and searched. At this moment, the beasts they encountered were even weaker. They were basically between the initial and advanced war god level. Of course, they would occasionally encounter a few perfect war god level beasts. Along the way, Qin Feiyang's heart couldn't calm down. Along the way, they not only encountered beasts, but also a large number of herbs. And many of those herbs he had never seen before. However, he didn't go out to collect them, because as long as the herbs were slightly older, there would be beasts protecting them. He wasn't afraid of these beasts, but he didn't want to cause trouble. Soon, a lake appeared in the image. The lake's area was dozens of miles. At this moment, the lake water was tumbling, creating 100 feet tall wave. Terrifying shockwaves from the battle swept across the sky like a tide. And in the sky above the lake, a man and a beast were crazily fighting. It was a young man. He looked to be about 25 or 26 years old. He was about 1.75 meters tall, and wore a black robe. His thick black hair danced in the wind. His body was covered in blood and his face was pale. But his aura was very strong. It was a low-level war god. Chapter 1940. The black-clothed youth's strength was already not bad, but the beast's aura was even stronger than the black-clothed youth's. It was a water serpent. Its body was several hundred meters long and covered in scales. Its two large eyes were filled with a terrifying light. Cultivation level, advanced war god. Even so, the fire serpent's body was covered in wounds and many of its scales were broken. Even the horns on its head were broken. Blood was pouring out like rain. Obviously, all of this was caused by the black-clothed youth. Unbelievable. A low-level war god human was able to fight to a draw with an advanced-level war god serpent. Fire Lotus murmured. Gao Xiaohui said in surprise. He's a disciple of Nine Heaven Palace. Disciple of Nine Heaven Palace? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus were slightly stunned. They turned around and asked Gao Xiaohui suspiciously. How did you know? Look at the left side of his chest. There's a Fire Lotus tattoo there. That tattoo is the symbol of Nine Heaven Palace. Gao Xiaohui said. Fire Lotus tattoo? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at the black-clothed youth again. Looking carefully, there really was a Fire Lotus tattoo on the youth's clothes. But because his clothes were torn and had blood stains, they didn't notice it before. Disciple of Nine Heaven Palace. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while, then looked at Gao Xiaohui and smiled. Then he might know your big brother. But just as he finished speaking, Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of something. He looked at the fire lotus tattoo on the black-clothed youth's chest again. Wait. Why does this tattoo look so familiar? He looked at the fire lotus on the side. Looking at the fire lotus tattoo, his eyes were a bit dazed. Oh right. Qin Feiyang suddenly shivered and looked at the mask on fire lotus's face in surprise. If he didn't remember wrongly, the fire lotus mark between his brows was very similar to the fire lotus pattern on the black-clothed young man's clothes. Fire lotus transmitted her voice. Qin Dage, could it be that I'm from the Nine Heavens Palace? Don't jump to conclusions just yet. Take off your mask and let me confirm it. Qin Feiyang thought. There's no need to confirm. I've taken a closer look. The two fire lotus patterns are exactly the same. Fire lotus said. Exactly the same. Qin Feiyang murmured. Was fire lotus really from Nine Heavens Palace? Then what was her status in the Nine Heavens Palace? My head hurts. Suddenly. Fire lotus hugged her head, her face contorted as she howled in pain. Obviously. She was thinking about the past. Seeing that, Qin Feiyang's face changed. He grabbed onto Fire Lotus and said, "Don't think about it anymore." Gao Xiaowei looked at the two of them suspiciously. What was going on? After a long while, Fire Lotus finally calmed down. Looking at the Fire Lotus pattern on the black-clothed young man's clothes, her eyes were filled with confusion. When I refine the undead barrier-breaking pill, your memory will naturally recover, so don't think too much about it now. Qin Feiyang comforted her secretly. All right. Fire Lotus nodded her head. Outside, the black-clothed young man and Shui Jiao were locked in battle. The surrounding space was collapsing one after another. You guys stay here, I'll go out and ask. Qin Feiyang reminded the two girls and with a flash, he appeared above the lake. He did not hide his aura. The black-clothed young man and Shui Jiao immediately noticed him. They stopped at the same time and looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang coughed dryly. A friendly smile appeared on his face, and he walked towards the black-clothed young man. Seeing that, the Shui Jiao immediately became ferocious. Looking at the black-clothed young man, it roared. You despicable human, you actually have a helper. Boom. Then it raised its huge tail and smashed it towards the black-clothed young man. The black-clothed young man's face changed, and he quickly shouted, Wait, I don't know him at all. If you don't know him, why would he smile at you? The Shui Jiao roared and its huge tail crazily swung down. The black-clothed young man was also very depressed, but now was not the time to think too much. Divine power surged out, and he threw a punch at the huge tail. Boom. The man and the beast were equally matched in strength. After the collision, they were both sent flying, blood flowing out. Looking at this scene, Qin Feiyang's expression was rather stunned. The black-clothed young man looked at Qin Feiyang and shouted, No matter who you are, stay away from us first, in case this beast says that I called for a helper. Okay. Qin Feiyang was stunned and nodded in response. He stepped aside, crossed his arms and watched quietly. Did you see that? If he was called by me, how could he just stand there and not attack? The black-clothed young man looked at the Shui Jiao and said. The Shui Jiao stabilized its huge body, glanced at Qin Feiyang, and attacked the black-clothed young man again. The bloody battle between the man and the beast began again. The Shui Jiao's cultivation was higher than the black-clothed young man, but it could not suppress the black-clothed young man. It even showed signs of being defeated. The more Qin Feiyang watched, the more puzzled he became. The black-clothed young man did not use a divine art or a divine artifact, but why could he suppress the Shui Jiao whose cultivation was higher than his? Suddenly, Qin Feiyang noticed that there was something fishy about the hands of the black-clothed young man. He observed carefully, and a look of realization gradually appeared in his eyes. The black-clothed young man was indeed wearing a pair of gloves, but that pair of gloves was different from other gloves. The gloves were as thin as cicada's wings and the color was exactly the same as the skin. If one did not have the ability to observe carefully, they would not have noticed. It seems that it is also a divine artifact, otherwise it would not be able to withstand the power of the Shui Jiao. Qin Feiyang murmured. The strength of a beast was naturally stronger than that of a human, especially this kind of water dragon that was closest to a divine dragon. Its physical strength was enough to suppress a human of the same realm. And now, the Shui Jiao was gradually suppressed by the black-clothed young man, which meant that the gloves were at least a middle-grade divine artifact. Bang, bang, bang. The man and the beast seemed to have some kind of agreement. Not only did they not use a divine art or divine artifact, they did not even activate their fighting souls. It was a battle of physical strength. About a few hundred breaths later, the Shui Jiao was losing more and more. What is going on? I have the body of a flood dragon, but I can't even defeat a mere human? The Shui Jiao roared. A human's physical body and strength are not to be underestimated. The black-clothed young man snorted and attacked more fiercely. The Shui Jiao looked at the black-clothed young man who was imposing, and looked at Qin Feiyang who was watching coldly from the side. The Shui Jiao roared unwillingly and turned around to escape. Don't go. We have an agreement. Are you trying to go back on your word? The black-clothed young man was stunned and hurriedly shouted. You even called your helper. What's the point of talking about an agreement? The Shui Jiao said without looking back. The black-clothed young man said angrily. I have said that I did not call him here. I don't know him at all. If you don't know him, why would he listen to you and retreat to the side just because you asked him to? Don't think that I am a fool. This emperor will not let go of today's debt. Just you wait. The Shui Jiao sneered and quickly disappeared into the vast mountains. Damn it, damn it. The black-clothed young man flew into a rage. He turned around and glared at Qin Feiyang. Who are you? Why did you run out? Do you know that I was just one step away from winning? Qin Feiyang was innocent. The black-clothed young man took a deep breath and tried to calm down. He looked at Qin Feiyang expressionlessly. Speak, what do you want? Qin Feiyang smiled. Brother, don't be angry. I don't have any other intentions. I just want to ask you about a person. Ooh. The black-clothed young man was suspicious. Gao Xiaolong. Qin Feiyang said. Gao Xiaolong? The black-clothed young man was stunned and shook his head. I don't know him. The black-clothed young man turned around and flew in the direction the Shui Jiao had escaped. Qin Feiyang quickly chased after him. He is also a disciple of your Nine Heavens Palace. There are countless disciples in the Nine Heavens Palace. If he isn't famous, who would know him? I still have things to do. Don't follow me. The black-clothed young man shouted impatiently. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but feel helpless. The departed spirit flower was about to fall into my hands, but a stupid idiot came out to mess things up. Damn it, I'm so unlucky. The black-clothed young man cursed under his breath without turning his head. Departed spirit flower? Qin Feiyang was stunned. He raised his head and looked at the black-clothed young man. If he remembered correctly, the departed spirit flower was one of the 4 ingredients needed to refine the departed spirit barrier-breaking pill. This was really a pleasant surprise. Brother! Qin Feiyang quickly chased after him. The black-clothed young man stopped in the void and turned around to glare at Qin Feiyang. He raised his eyebrows and said, What else do you want? Do you believe that I won't be polite to you? Calm down, calm down. I heard you mention the departed spirit flower. I think I can help you. Qin Feiyang smiled. You heard it. The black-clothed young man frowned. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Don't. Although I heard it, I don't have any thoughts about the departed spirit flower. Moreover, you are a disciple of the Nine Heaven Palace. You have a noble status. Even if I have thoughts about it, I wouldn't dare. Qin Feiyang laughed. At least you have some self-awareness. The black-clothed young man smiled coldly. He shook his head and sighed. However, you can't help me because the departed spirit flower is in the hands of the water serpent. It's just a water serpent. Just kill it. Qin Feiyang said. The water serpent was only a god of war in the greater success stage. He could easily kill it alone. However, when he heard Qin Feiyang's words, the black-clothed young man's expression changed. He hurriedly said, You can't kill it. You can't kill it? Qin Feiyang was startled. He asked suspiciously, What do you mean? The water serpent's strength isn't that great, but its parents are very strong. Both of them are half-step divine lords. Do you think they will let us go if we kill the water serpent? The black-clothed young man sighed. I see. Qin Feiyang nodded. Therefore, we can only use our wits to get the departed spirit flower. I had an agreement with it. We won't use any divine techniques, divine weapons, or battle souls. If it loses to me, it will give me the departed spirit flower. I was about to succeed, but in the end, you messed it up. Don't you think I'm angry? The black-clothed young man glared at Qin Feiyang and said angrily. It's my fault. It's my fault. Qin Feiyang nodded. He felt guilty. Chapter 1941. Forget it. I'm not such a petty person. I know you didn't do it on purpose. But can you stop following me? I really don't know that dragon you're talking about. The black-clothed youth looked at Qin Feiyang in annoyance. It doesn't matter if you don't know him. You're all disciples of Nine Heaven Palace anyway. As long as you help me ask around, I'm sure you'll find out. I won't let you work for nothing. I'll think of a way to get you the departed spirit flower. Qin Feiyang said. The black-clothed youth looked at Qin Feiyang and frowned. Then tell me, what method do you have? Qin Feiyang asked. Is the departed spirit flower with the anaconda? Yes. The black-clothed youth nodded. Qin Feiyang said. Okay, I'll go kill it and get you the departed spirit flower. Kill it. The black-clothed youth was shocked and said angrily. Did you hear what I just said? Its parents are both half-step monarch god existences. Killing it is the same as seeking death. It's fine. You don't have to do anything. Even if its parents find out, they'll look for me. They won't implicate you. Qin Feiyang smiled. The black-clothed youth was stunned. He looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, Are you sure? Qin Feiyang nodded. Okay. As long as you bring me the departed spirit flower, I'll immediately return to Nine Heaven Palace and help you ask about that dragon. The black-clothed youth clenched his teeth and said, Okay, wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Qin Feiyang smiled and teleported, disappearing from the black-clothed youth's sight. What a fool. The black-clothed youth shook his head, his eyes full of disdain. After leaving the black-clothed youth's sight, Qin Feiyang summoned the white-eyed wolf to chase after the anaconda. After some effort, the man and the wolf finally found the water serpent in front of a waterfall. The water jiao was lying on a huge rock in front of the waterfall, recuperating while mumbling something angrily. Sure. Qin Feiyang, together with the white-eyed wolf, flew above the water-flood dragon and greeted it with a smile. The shui jiao was slightly taken aback. It raised its head to look at the man and the wolf. It didn't pay any attention to them at all. It immediately withdrew its gaze. Ugh. The white-eyed wolf was stunned. This guy had a lot of guts. He actually dared to ignore them. The man and the wolf landed in front of the white-eyed wolf. The wolf grinned and said, Aren't you afraid that we'll kill you? Kill me? Shui Jiao was stunned on the spot, but soon after, his eyes were filled with mockery. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, You're not a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace, are you? No. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then that's funny. Even that disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace didn't dare to say such words to me. Who do you think you are? Do you want to die? Shui Jiao's eyes were filled with disdain. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I know what you're relying on, but a mere half-step divine emperor doesn't have the right to be arrogant in front of me. What did you say? Shui Jiao raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang and the white-eyed wolf. His eyes were filled with shock. I said, even if your parents were here, they wouldn't have the right to be arrogant in front of me. Qin Feiyang laughed. Haha, Shui Jiao raised his head and laughed. He didn't hide his contempt. Little Qin Zi, he still doesn't believe you. The white-eyed wolf joked. He'll believe you soon. Qin Feiyang laughed and waved his hand. A blood-red light instantly entered Shui Jiao's sea of qi. Ah, Shui Jiao immediately screamed, and his aura quickly dissipated. He looked at Qin Feiyang in disbelief. Did he really attack him? The most terrifying thing was, that blood-red light was so fast that he couldn't even react. The white-eyed wolf gloated. See, this is the consequence of showing off in front of us. Shui Jiao came back to his senses, and his eyes flashed with a fierce light. He laughed and said, You're finished. Even God can't save you. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I'll kill you now. Qin Feiyang's eyes were cold. He said, I don't want your life. I just want the ghost flower. Give it to me immediately. Don't even think about it. Shui Jiao sneered. Qin Feiyang sighed and said, It seems that there are a lot of stubborn people and fierce beasts in this ancient world. In that case, let's do it. Anyway, I want to taste this dragon's meat. Do you want to stew it? Or braise it? Or stir-fry it? Or barbecue it? As the white-eyed wolf spoke, he wiped his saliva and his eyes were green. Looking at the white-eyed wolf's eyes, Shui Jiao couldn't help but start to panic. A wise man knows when to retreat. He decisively took out a jade box and threw it to Qin Feiyang, saying, This is the ghost flower you want. Take it and leave. So cowardly? The white-eyed wolf was stunned and immediately lost interest. He hadn't shown his real strength yet, but he was already so scared. He was worse than a paper tiger. Qin Feiyang smiled, grabbed the jade box and opened it. A black flower suddenly appeared. This flower was about the size of an egg. It had a total of 4 petals, like a small trumpet. It was pitch black and emitted a trace of black mist. This kind of black fog gave off a gloomy and eerie feeling. This is the ghost flower? The white-eyed wolf was curious. It's exactly the same as what's recorded in the scripture of pills. It should be good. According to the scripture of pills, the ghost flower can only be born in places with extremely strong yin energy. In other words, places like cemeteries or 10,000 burial mounds. Therefore, the ghost flower is an item of extreme yin energy. If it's not refined and consumed directly, it will take one's life. Qin Feiyang said. Then this thing can't be touched. The white-eyed wolf swallowed his saliva. Qin Feiyang said, So you'd better keep your thoughts to yourself and don't have any ideas about this ghost flower. Did I? The white-eyed wolf was stunned and laughed dryly. It seems like you didn't, but what are you thinking now? I know very well. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes. Seeing that his thoughts were seen through, the white-eyed wolf smiled embarrassedly. Qin Feiyang put away the jade box and looked at Shui Jiao. Where did you find this ghost flower? I don't know. Shui Jiao turned his head away. Boom. A terrifying murderous aura roared out of Qin Feiyang's body. He said word by word. I must know. Little Qinzi. Why do you care so much? The white-eyed wolf was puzzled. There's something you don't know. Death fruit, ghost wood, and the ghost flower are all items of extreme yin energy. Therefore, the place where the ghost flower is born is likely to have death fruit and ghost wood. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. I see. The white-eyed wolf nodded and stared at Shui Jiao. Tell us, and we'll leave immediately. But if you dare to be stubborn, we'll stew you now. Why am I so unlucky to meet 2 bastards who don't care about their lives? Shui Jiao wailed and said helplessly, I don't know where the ghost flower came from. You don't know? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. I really don't know. Some time ago, I killed a disciple of the 9th Heaven Palace. I found the ghost flower in his interspatial ring. Shui Jiao said. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and looked at the white-eyed wolf. Let's go. The man and the wolf rushed into the sky. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang stopped again and looked down at Shui Jiao. In fact, the person who fought with you just now used some tricks. Otherwise, you would have defeated him with your strength. What tricks? Shui Jiao was stunned and said angrily. He was wearing a pair of gloves. I think it should be a middle-grade divine artifact. After saying this, Qin Feiyang didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left with the white-eyed wolf. Damn bastard, how dare you trick me? Just you wait. The water flood dragon immediately frowned and became extremely angry. Achoo. Above the lake, the young man in black sneezed, rubbed his nose and murmured suspiciously. Who's cursing me behind my back? Whoosh. Soon, a stream of light flashed through the sky. It was Qin Feiyang. As for the white-eyed wolf, he had already gone to the castle to cultivate in seclusion. Brother, how was it? When the young man in black saw Qin Feiyang, he greeted him enthusiastically. Qin Feiyang smiled and waved his hand. A jade box appeared. The young man in black immediately grabbed the jade box and opened it. His eyes lit up. Ghost flower. I finally got it. The young man in black was extremely excited. Qin Feiyang asked calmly, "Brother, what do you want this ghost flower for?" "Nonsense, of course it's to exchange for soul stones." "You don't know, but in the ninth heaven palace, one ghost flower can be exchanged for 100 soul stones," the young man in black said with a burning gaze. "Exchange for soul stones?" Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback. Wouldn't this be a bit of a waste? Soul stones were very important. But the ghost flower was so rare that it could be said to be a rare treasure. How could he exchange it for soul stones? All of a sudden, he had an idea and smiled. "Brother, how about this? I'll give you 100 soul stones and you'll give me the ghost flower?" The young man in black was stunned and asked in surprise, "You have 100 soul stones?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "You're not joking, right? How can someone as poor as you have soul stones?" The young man in black frowned. Ugh. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He sized himself up and could not help but chuckle bitterly in his heart. Previously, when he went to Ninth Heaven Palace, he deliberately dressed up. Therefore, his current image was indeed worthy of the word poor. "To be honest, brother, although I'm not that rich, I've worked hard to save some soul stones over the years. If you're willing to exchange, I'll give you soul stones right away," Qin Feiyang said. "This?" The young man in black hesitated for a moment and nodded. "All right, since you're the one who snatched the ghost flower, I might as well give it to you instead of letting those old guys from Ninth Heaven Palace benefit. I'll exchange with you." "Thank you." Qin Feiyang cupped his fists and smiled. Entering the ancient castle, he took out 100 soul stones and handed them to the young man in black. The young man in black was surprised. "You have a spatial divine item?" "This little brother is untalented. I came across one by chance, but it's just an ordinary spatial divine item. Not worth mentioning." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. "Not worth mentioning?" The corner of the young man's mouth twitched, shaking his head with a bitter smile. "Brother, I'm a disciple of Ninth Heaven Palace, but I can't even compare to a country bumpkin like you are." After he finished saying those words, he received the soul stone and handed the jade case to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang took the jade box and cupped his fists. "Then I'll have to trouble brother with Gao Xiaolong's matter." "It's a small matter." The young man in black waved his hand, opening an altar and stepping onto it. Qin Feiyang also followed him onto the altar. "What are you doing here?" The young man in black looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. "I'll wait for you outside the Ninth Heaven Palace." Qin Feiyang smiled. "That's good, I don't have to run around." The young man in black smiled. When the two of them arrived near the Ninth Heaven Palace, the young man in black turned into a streak of light, flying up the stairway. Qin Feiyang stood on the mountain peak, looking at the young man in black's back with a smile in his eyes. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.